3, 2, 1. What's going on, everyone? It's another episode of the Ash Wednesday Hangout stream because I don't have a creative title or marketing strategy for this thing. But it's another fun Wednesday. It's New Comic Book Day. We're here to talk about comics, but also pop culture stuff, just anything that comic geeks and nerds would be into. This is a very chill stream, very informal, if you will. Come hang out, drink your favorite beverage, eat some snacks, maybe get some popcorn or some chips and salsa. Well, I don't know what your favorite snacks are. Tonight, I am drinking Sam Adams Boston Lager, one of my favorite beers. And I also have, as a chaser, a nice Bloody Mary. That's what I'm going tonight. Joining me as, well, most often, I should say, I guess always, the 100% of the time, my fellow Discord pals for the Hangout stream. Joe Corallo is in the house. Joe, how are you? I am doing very good. For those of you that don't know, Joe is he's a comic writer, comic editor, probably other things in comics that I'm not knowledgeable enough to give him a proper introduction, but he does have a comic coming out very shortly called Beckstar. You can get it at your local comic book store. No need to cough up a Benjamin. How do the kids say it these days? You don't need to do that on a Kickstarter and then wait 6 months. You can go to your comic book store, support your LCS, get it right from them. I'm ordering myself a copy. Also joining me as very often, my good partner in crime, SkipNTosh. How are you, my friend? Chirp, chirp, chirp. Technology always works. Nice. And last, but certainly, well, maybe he might be least. We don't know. He's making his, what do you call it? The third, is this like the third time you've been on the channel, Zach? So it's not really a debut. It's not really a sophomore effort. Uh-oh. Stop. Hold on. I'm hearing we have some technical difficulties on my end. We're going to start this. So apparently the you guys' audio is not coming through. So give me a sec here. Give me a sound check, Skip. Skip, are you on mute again? Yeah, hold on a second. I'm having some weird audio issues from Streamlabs not transmitting your guys' audio. Have a second here. Making sure Windows is directing audio correctly through the Yeti. Yep. All right, Skip, give me an audio check. Still not doing it. Let's try this. Audio check again.
Audio check again.
There we go. You guys should be live. Let's do this again. 3, 2, 1. What's going on, everyone? I already did my intro. Joe is here. Joe,
it's true.
Repeat what you said for the audience, and I apologize.
I think I just said, I'm all right. How are you? And you mostly did the intro of me being a writer and editor and Beckstar coming out. You can order a copy.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes. Beckstar. Get it. Buy it. Multiple copies.
Hooray.
Give one to a friend. Skip. Your technology works better than mine. I apologize what I said backstream. Instant karma definitely hit me in the face. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine. Just trying to soothe the bruise on your cheek that karma has swung like a left hook into the right in the kisser.
I feel like
it's tough sometimes.
I feel like the ghost of John Lennon is just right here and just a bit smack. Man, and certainly last not least, blah blah blah, deja vu. We got Zach Richmond in the house, also known as Other Boy Zach, Twitter ban Zach.
I like that, by the way. That made me laugh. No, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We're on the backside of hump day. You know, a little bit left of the week to go. I'm doing good, though. I'm doing good. Got my coffee. I'm here chilling out, ready to talk some comics and some nerd stuff.
Very nice. Very nice.
Cool.
Well, speaking of nerd stuff, we got people in chat. Unbelievable that I can even wrangle one person in my chat. So thank you guys for showing up. Love you guys being here. This is a stream to hang out with you guys. Dragon Majesty, want to say hi. Shout out to boy Jimmy Comics Quirks with Josh. Wait, no. I don't know. He's got a long name. We just call him Jimmy because he's Superman's pal. Dominic Powell is also in the house. Good to see you, Dominic. Joe is on the panel. You don't need to talk about him. He'll do the talking. And those are the current... Oh, Dragon Ball Talk is here. Good to see you, Dragon Ball. So, what's on everyone's mind? This is a very informal conversation. Joe, what's going on in your mind right now or lately?
Just read some comics. I've been going through Walt Simonson's Thor run. I read X-Men 19 and Beta Ray Bill #1 today. I got some independent comics in the mail this week. Got a buddy of mine's comic, The Scent of Rain, from Kickstarter. Got that in the mail. It's nice. It's a nice, like graphic novel size little book. And then a buddy of mine, Tim, sent me a bunch of his comics. So I got a nice little bit of big two and indie stuff to work through.
Sweet. What was your highlight of all the books you read, of the ones you mentioned? Was there anyone that stood out in particular?
I still got to read Son of Rain and these books. I only read those Marvel books and they're not good. So I wouldn't recommend.
Are you pulling our leg? You're saying there was Marvel books that weren't good?
I nothing against the people involved and all that, but Beta Ray Bill #1 and X-Men 19 were not good comics.
That's unfortunate. I was having some high hopes for the Beta Ray Bill.
I did too. It was it wasn't bad. It was just it was a waste of Daniel Warren Johnson. The art's great, but tying it into King in Black and stuff like that. When you have someone so unique, let him do his own thing. Don't tie it into events going on right now. It's going to date it. It's going to make it a weird read later. Unlike Wonder Woman Dead Earth, which was fantastic. I had read that and I had read Murder Falcon, so I was really pumped for this, and it just no dice. It's a real shame. And I would, that's part of why I was like, oh, let me reread Simonson's Thor. Let me read some more Thor stuff, like really get into the mood. And no. And then, I don't know. And then.
Is this your first time reading Simonson's Thor, or is this a reread?
This is a reread. I mean, I haven't touched it in a long time. But,
so, how long ago, like approximately, like has it been since you've read it?
Probably a decade.
Okay. That's fine. It's probably been longer for me even. I'm just curious, how is it holding up? Is it aging? Is it good as it was? Better than it was? What do you think?
No, I think it's solid. I think it's a really good read. I mean, there's a lot of elements to it where you see how it's kind of like a precursor to things like Sandman. Where it's this like. It certainly elevates the character and the mythos and really leans into some of the high fantasy elements that other people who had done Thor in the past didn't necessarily lean as hard into. Like it still ultimately was like a superhero book for a lot of writers. But this really goes into, a lot of mythology and all of that. And, with which other writers would do from there. But this is probably the one that feels the most like, it could have been like an epic line book,
Sweet.
Yeah.
What about you, Skip?
What about me?
What about you?
You asking what books I got today?
I'm just
Or
curious.
just what I've been
no,
reading?
no. Yeah, if you
Wow.
got some books, or have you been reading anything in the past week that you just wanted to talk about? What's on your mind dealing with show related stuff? Just trying to.
I mean, for the most part, it's just been like sorting my comics and kind of lining up what I'm gonna read and what order between stuff that I enjoy just for my pleasure, stuff that we may cover in either the Criminal Cast or on our bi-weekly the Unnamed Indie Comic Show or comic book show. So yeah, it's kind of somewhere in between there. Like it's weird because I jump between like physicals and digitals so much. I'll be like in the line to at the bank for the teller, and like I'm like, oh yeah, where did I leave up? Okay, yeah, I'll pop up Brubaker and Darwin Cook's Catwoman and like keep rolling on that, or whatever. But I don't know, man. For the most part, I've just really been enjoying finding more and more Howard Chaykin books that I didn't know he wrote. I just got his Black Hawk. I also got well, actually, I think I talked about it. I received or I found his dang it, something into the unknown. That old comic book line
Challengers
that
of
I
the
think
Unknown.
Challengers of the Unknown, yeah,
Yeah.
where they were saying that they ripped the Fantastic Four off of.
Oh,
So I didn't know.
absolutely did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jack Kirby created Challengers of the Unknown.
Yeah, right. So it only makes sense.
So he just like scraped off the serial numbers, because if you look at Stan's original pitch for Fantastic Four, it doesn't match what Kirby's doing at all. So Kirby clearly went like, I'm just going to do this. Because like the original Invisible Woman was invisible all the time and like wore a mask, and there were like all these other things that like were part of it. And Jack was just like, fuck it, I'm just doing this is what I'm doing. I'm just doing Challenge of the Unknown, like down to like the costumes even are very similar. It's like a color palette swap.
It's
Wow.
really strange how comics back in that time period, the big two were just basically ripping each other off left and right. Just almost like carbon copies of a lot of their books. It feels that way. Like, the whole Doom Patrol X-Men controversy, Doom Patrol comes out 3 months later, X-Men comes out, and it's like, look, it's a bunch of weird characters with strange powers, and they're led by a guy in a wheelchair. Like, what a coincidence. Never before or since has anyone come up with that concept, but 3 months apart, both Marvel and DC, or, farther apart, you got the Aquaman and Submariner things, and I don't know, it feels like the big two, you can almost every character seems to have an analog or a copy. And it used to be a lot more blatant. They don't really do that as much today because I think they get called out more.
Oh my God. So cartoonist Kayfabe today was going over the old Marvel trading cards, like the series 2. And Jubilee was like just like Carrie Kelly in those trading cards.
Oh, totally.
Like down to like the little like symbol, like pin that had like like the first initial on it. Like it was
I always felt like Jubilee was like a purposeful homage to Robin, and giving kind of Wolverine like a Robin character. It's just interesting that back in the day they would just do it left and right, and it was just like, well, Man Thing, Swamp Thing. It's like and nowadays, it's like, oh, New Age of Heroes was just DC trying to be more, like, well, yeah, that's how comics have been for 80 years. Like,
yeah, well, it's also people just trying to find controversy, so it doesn't help either.
Right, but I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just wrong. You're right. You obviously are right there. It's just, I think back in the day that people would just have accepted, if they would have made, say, like Damage in the 60s,
Yeah.
People would have been like, oh, it's kind of like Hulk, but no one would have been like, what? And people was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you know?
Oh yeah.
And nowadays it's like, how dare they make a character that's similar? And I'm like, you realize that Carol Danvers is just a couple of letters off of Kara Danvers, and she's essentially Marvel's Supergirl.
Yeah.
But I guess, but a lot of these people don't really even know. Anyways, Zach, other boy Zach.
Yes.
We don't want to leave you hanging in the wind.
No, I'm just racking my brain thinking of all the different comparisons I could make between Marvel. I was thinking there's obviously, Wade Wilson and Slade Wilson that you had. You had Deadpool and Deathstroke.
Yeah.
That was the big one that was in my head right there. And you had, of course, Hyperion and with the Squadron Supreme, and I mean
Sure.
the entire Squadron Supreme in the Justice League. So no, I'm just racking my brain with different comparisons between the big two. But
well, Thanos' dark side.
Thanos' dark side, yeah. Although dark side's cooler,
in
my opinion.
It's the shame he got on the big screen sooner.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I saw the Snyder cut, and man, just those dark side scenes just do it for me, man. Every time I've seen it 3 or 4 times now, and those dark scenes with dark side they do it for me. They're so awesome. Anyway, other than that, no, I'm doing good. Went to the comic shop today, picked up some books. I'm about to take a cue from Skip. I've got to go through and sort them, maybe alphabetize a few. It's kind of looks like a tornado went through my boxes and did all the sorting for me. So I'm going to have to do that at some point. But yeah, I picked up, I mentioned backstage, I was able to get my hands on some Once and Future issues. I got 1 through 4 that I read through. I'm really loving it so far. Kieran Gillen can write a good. Dan Moore's art too is also I love Dan Moore's art. I've decided his art is really great. Picked up a few other books. Let's see. I picked up the new Flash. What's that? 768. Not a bad story. They haven't killed Wally or made him do anything terrible in the first issue. So far so good. Or his first issue back, I guess, as the Flash. Yeah. So got the Beta Ray Bill. Like Joe was saying, I just found it to be kind of underwhelming. I was expecting a bit more. And yeah, the King in Black stuff, it does kind of put an expiration sticker on it, kind of. Kind of cool, some parts of it. I don't want to spoil it if anybody out there is really looking forward to getting it. I don't want to spoil. There were some parts of it that I really liked, and I'm hoping that as the story goes on, I hope that the King in Black stuff kind of gets left behind in this first issue, and as it goes forward in the miniseries, that we progress and get away from that. But
I was just going to ask. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was just going to ask if this was a miniseries, and you just explained that it was.
Yep,
that makes it almost like kind of criminal to do that.
Yeah.
You should not take a miniseries and cross it, like, unless the miniseries is part of the event itself,
right?
Like the various
like
King
a tie-in.
Well, like the various King in Black miniseries, right? They're doing specifically like King in Black, Spider-Man. Okay, but if you're just doing a miniseries of a random character for their own thing, that should not tie into an event. Like it, an ongoing books can cross. The miniseries should be concise and to the point and wholly its own story. The crossover this is just more evidence of Marvel just being completely out of their minds, not knowing what they're doing, run by incompetence. And to Joe's point he made earlier, I cannot agree more. And I'm not even a huge Daniel Warren Johnson fan, although I'm open to the idea. I just haven't been exposed enough. That you get a guy like this. He obviously has a very specific voice set. He's not your standard kind of mainstream comic guy. You get a guy like this, and he's doing kind of eclectic stuff. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I'm going with it. Utilize that, right? It's like back in the day when you would get Bill Sienkiewicz to do a book, right?
Sure.
You did some weird stuff with it. You didn't just be like, we're going to tell Spider-Man story, just normal Spider-Man, Bill Sienkiewicz, Spider-Man, nonstop Spider-Man. No, like you didn't. You did something kind of weird. Oh, we're going to do some Legion story and like get into and I don't know why they don't utilize that more. But we'll talk. I got an idea I want to throw by you, or a question to throw by you later. I don't want to step too much on Zach's
Sure.
toes here.
But Zach, though, real quick, since you also read this, I'm curious your opinion on this.
Sure.
Did you feel like the King in Black stuff might have just been tacked on after the fact? Because a lot of that felt like it could have been added like after breakdowns were already done.
You know, I did think about that. It's like I was thinking about it after I read it. I was like, you know, going to the scenes specifically that seem to correspond with King in Black. It's like this really could have been any other time, and this specific instance, you know, this monster. Spoilers, there's a monster. This specific monster that they fight, it could have been at any point in history, in King in Black or not. You know, it could have been any time. So yeah, I think there is kind of that feeling that it was just kind of tacked on there or added to it at the last minute, because you don't need it for the story that it seems like it's propping up and getting ready to tell. You don't. It doesn't need King in Black.
It does not at all. It's not even that kind of story, and it honestly feels like they just added very little to the art to make it that way, and just changed the dialogue.
Yeah, and it seems, if anything, like this miniseries builds more off what's happened, not from anything in King in Black, but even prior to King in Black, stuff related to Thor and Beta Ray Bill, and it seems like it goes back, you know. So yeah, why they have King in Black even involved is kind of, you know, beyond me. I don't know why they would do it unless they're hoping. And if this is the way someone's thinking, then I'm sorry that they're thinking like me. But you know, they're thinking, well, hey, we got these new readers, and all they're reading is King in Black and Venom and Donny Cates, and there's Donny Cates is writing Thor, and oh, hey, Thor has Beta Ray Bill. Well, these kids, they don't know who he is, so if they go pick up Beta Ray Bill, we want something to connect them so they can get engulfed in this book more. Let's throw in King in Black in some weird way.
Yeah, it's that kind of overthinking that tanks books.
Overthinking. That's exactly what it is. It's just convoluted overthinking, and yeah. So, but that's it. Like I said, I hope the next issue or you know, the rest of the story builds off of this and it becomes better. But yeah, this first issue definitely did not impress me like other first issue miniseries have.
Real quick.
Other than that, was kind of a slow day. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. No, I just wanted to kind of address some of the chats that have been coming through. Jimmy earlier on had said that he's eating or making spaghetti. He's presumably eating it or done by now.
Yum.
While he's eating comics. I love spaghetti. Let's see. Dragon Ball wants us to show something instead of nothing. Well, we're showing off Joe. He's the star.
That's true.
We throw him up on the screen and we instantly become a hit.
Yeah, is Joe not good enough for you, Dragon Ball? Jeez.
Dominic says, cartoon kayfabe is good stuff. The guys have genuine passion for the medium as they share their industry experience with the audience, including sharing some of the comic history. I absolutely agree. I know some people don't like their style. They kind of have a weird, I don't know if I'd call it like urban nerd. Like, it's weird. It's like, Piscor is just, he's an interesting character. And some people I've heard, I don't have a problem. I think he's cool. But some people are just like, man, why is he trying to be all like, I don't know. If you see him, you guys will know what I mean. I'm not going to try to describe it and mess it all up, but they are very knowledgeable and they talk about lots of indie book stuff, and not just indie, like I would say like underground indie. It's really cool, but they also talk about some big mainstream stuff, classic runs. They did a feature on my favorite book of all time, Frank Miller's Batman Year One, and did a really good breakdown of the book and things, that I couldn't necessarily say any better, so I could point you to them. Give them a check out if you're interested in some like deep dive comic knowledge and breakdowns of the medium and the craft and the history. Him and his I forget his partner's name.
Jim Rugg.
Okay. But yeah, check those guys out. Jimmy says, I don't have any Marvel books on my list at the moment. I'm just following indie creators that I like and not having to worry about a creator being canned 3 issues after launch. That is a huge problem the big two are doing, and people are kind of getting wise to that. Like people like Jimmy are just like, wait a minute, you launched this book and it's got my favorite artist on it and he's gone within 3 issues. And that's why I wanted to buy the book. That was part of the appeal. That feels that rubs me the wrong way. At least if you're honest, maybe if you're honest about it and be like, hey, this guy's gonna do the first 3 issues, then you can make a decision first. But this sort of like, hey, look at this new book featuring so and so, and you're like, oh, okay. If you don't even last a full story arc, I just feel like shame on you.
Oh yeah, especially if they don't last the whole story arc. Yeah, it's like, what's even the point?
So you want to hear something? I got an Ed Piscor story. It's kind of fucked up. So I had met Ed before at a signing in Brooklyn, and I picked up WYSIWYG. This was like right when like Hip Hop Family Tree Volume 1 came out. So I met him there, but the fucked up part is for the 2018 Ringo Awards, we were sitting at the same table. You know, they have those like round like tables where they serve you like, food, and they have the whole award ceremony and all that. And at that Ringo's, I won a Ringo and he didn't.
Poor Ed.
So I'm like, so it's like, this is a little awkward.
Yeah, that's got to be pretty awkward.
Yeah.
I know people that don't like Ed, and I know the reasons why they don't like Ed, and I feel like their reasons for not liking him are good, but I just don't feel that way. Like in his own 2021 way, I feel like he's kind of like the closest thing that we have to like a modern day, even though obviously he's still around, but like a modern day. Gosh, how am I blanking on his name now? He's the supercharged guy, the Deadpool creator.
Rob Liefeld.
Yeah, I feel like he's like I'm not trying to be mean if you want to say budget, but that's how I feel. Like he's always super stoked about comics. He's always got some crazy funny story to tell. Like, he's always got his own very unique, interesting way of like having it, explaining it and like having it come across. And like kind of like Rob Liefeld, for like whatever his shortcomings are, I feel like he totally makes up for it in just pure unadulterated charisma.
Sure.
So that's a good I dig Ed, man. I dig him.
Skip though. Let's get into it a little bit. Why do people have an issue with Ed?
Right before it slipped out of my mouth, I was like, if I say this, Joe Corallo is going to ask me to follow up on this.
Yeah.
How do I know this?
So it's prime time, baby.
I knew it. Well, essentially not even essentially, it was like I think in the beginning of one of his books, I don't know if it's the Hip Hop Family Tree or not, because I didn't pay attention to what this person said the book was, but they did literally like post a picture of it or whatever.
Yeah.
He was like basically giving a shout out to some people, and he used the N-word.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they don't like him.
I happen to know some things about Ed that he doesn't share this stuff. He doesn't make a big deal out of it. But Ed does actually mentor and tutor Black kids how to draw in Pittsburgh.
Oh.
He works with I know Yona Harvey, who was the first Black woman to do Storm with Black Panther and the Crew.
Yeah.
So we email back and forth. We talk. I'm working with her on something now. But Ed Piscor is her son's mentor.
That's dope.
And it's teaching him how to draw. So honestly, and the other thing too is he's not out there. He never talks about it. He never makes a big deal out of the kind of stuff he does like that out of the kindness of his heart and just trying to help the community.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing where when people, get weird about that stuff, I can tell them based on what I know, fuck him. Like
Yeah.
he's out there doing the work and not asking for any of the credit.
Yep.
And that's a hell of a lot more than most people do that share around, either clips or this and that,
So
Absolutely.
is that what I never heard this story, and I'm very entertained and enlightened. I'm glad I got to have you guys, share that.
Yeah.
The only thing I've ever heard negative about Ed Piskor is just trivial stuff. Nothing actually like character wise, just more like, oh, the dude comes off like a total wannabe, like rapper thug, like, okay,
Wigger,
that's all
stuff,
surface traits, right? That's just your aesthetic. You go, whatever.
Yeah.
I never heard that this was a case, and then I hear you guys tell me the story, and I'm like, really? That's it? That's all he did was drop a bad word?
Essentially,
let's the day and age we live in, though.
No, I get it. I get that, like, I get the I don't know. I'm like, come on, man. Like, it's just, is it nice? No, it's not nice. Don't be using racial slurs of any type. But if you do, I'm just gonna like look at you cross-eyed and just be like, what, shame on you, like, and just move on. Like,
yeah,
you now here's the difference. When someone's doing it 100 times a day and being like, F these people and blah blah, and just constant racial slurs, like, if anyone's ever played on Xbox Live,
or PlayStation,
or PlayStation, it's
where's this going, Ash?
Man, I played Saints Row. I don't know if any of you guys heard of this game, Saints Row. It's a gangster game. I played the back in the day. Played on the multiplayer, and it was just full of preteen kids screaming the most vile, like, racial shit, like, just at each other nonstop. You were like, whoa.
Well, that's every game of Call of Duty multiplayer that's ever been played.
No, I never had that much problem on Call of Duty as much as like Saints Row. It was just over the top, but whatever. You can tell if someone truly is a trashy, racist, hating individual. Like you've seen the stereotypical videos of like Klans members, talking stuff like, yeah, that's one thing. But one dude drops one racial thing, and he probably wasn't even doing it in a hateful way, if I had to guess. He probably just threw it out there.
Yeah, he wasn't.
And he's guilty of using a word while not the right skin color. And it's like, come on, I don't know. I'm not going to go off on the whole political thing, but let's just all put our big boy pants on and stop this hate.
Yeah, it's tough because everybody feels different about it. But back to Joe's point, like, that's a ignorant thing that he did. That's a bad decision that he's made. And at some point in time, we've probably all done something that ignorant and dumb, and we learned from it, right? But like Joe said, because to corroborate Joe's story, I didn't know how close Joe was to some of the people that he was mentoring, but I did know that he did things like that in his community. A good buddy of mine that I have online that like is usually in our chats and even in our Discord and whatnot. I won't say who it is, but lives over in that city and has witnessed Ed doing multiple things like that because he literally lives in the same city as him. So you like, I know, the character of Ed Piskor outside of those, snapshots in time, and what he does day to day, week to week, is more proof of who he actually is than those terrible decisions that he made in those bits of time. So overall, like I said, I love the charisma. I like those kind of cartoonist kayfabe videos for majority of them are very insightful. Like, a lot of knowledge is shared of them, and like I said, over everything, it's just when those dudes talk, you just hear, like, of all the different channels and stuff that I go around and either be in the chat or on videos or whatever, there was I mean, even still, just a point in time where I was so drawn to their stuff because it's cool to cover comic book news and industry and this and that and, give our opinions on it. But those dudes don't talk about all that. All they talk about are the creators and the creations. And there's just a purity to it that just draws me to it. And I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they, I mean, and I don't always agree with, their assessments on things. And sometimes they do stuff that's pretty ballsy. They did a video, I think it was last week, where they were ripping apart like Roger Stern's Spider-Man issues. And like Roger Stern, for a lot of people, is considered the Spider-Man writer, like hands down. There's a whole generation of people who are like, that's the guy. And they savaged like a few issues. They weren't his best issues in his run, but they like savaged him. So like, I mean, even when I don't agree with what they're saying or doing like that, I appreciate that they're at least, you're clearly being honest if you're, ravaging something like that,
Absolutely.
On a personal note, that's one of the reasons I mean, there's many reasons I like them, but one of the reasons I do appreciate watching their videos and stuff is the fact that I'm not getting what sometimes I feel like some channels do, is that sort of mindless, just we praise everything all the time. Everything's great because we don't ever want to say anything negative and upset the fans that like that thing. So,
yeah, it's all a balance because there's channels that they like act like they're trying to like balance, but the problem is if you have like a brand and an audience that you're just, just bending to every time,
right.
What the video is from the title and who you're dealing with alone. And, I'm not going to name names or stuff, but there are some channels where it's like, why would I watch this? I know
you can predict exactly what they're gonna say.
Yeah,
everything's
right.
this is the subject by you, therefore I already know your conclusion because you're so unwavering in your viewpoints. Yeah, I don't like those either. And I definitely don't like the pendulum the other way. There are some channels that are just straight constant negative, like trashing on everything, trying to find an excuse. I'm not going to name names. I almost did, but
no, it's fine.
I'm growing up. I'm getting a few levels of maturity.
Well, especially when, because there's some channels that they trash everything and then they also have like a crowdfunding campaign they're doing, and then it turns into a like everything sucks except my comic, buy my comic.
Right. Everything sucks, like, and the cadre of fellow other friends that are also making comics.
Yeah.
Like,
and
like us small group of people are all making the best comics ever made. Everything else, and 500 comics a month are coming out and they're absolute trash. We are the only people with the keys to understand making good comics. And I hate that. I hate that. And it's like, it immediately makes me feel like you're completely disingenuous. You can't, you're going to say you're like the greatest comic creators, because some of the best books I've ever read in comics have come out in the past, 3 years that I've been back in comics. Not many.
Sure.
There's a ton of garbage out there, I readily admit. But there's some gems out there, and to just dismiss it all, if it's it's all agenda driven. Like I said, I guess being genuine is what attracts me to discussion like this or watching other channels. Like, I don't care if I agree with your opinion or disagree with your opinion. I just want to know that it's coming from a genuine place.
Sure. I mean, Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, like, there have always been bad comics. Any decade, there are terrible comics. It's just like movies or anything else.
NFL Super Pro is a masterpiece.
Where everything, like, the cream rises to the top, if you will. So like there's always people that say like with movies, cinemaphiles, will often say things like the 70s was the greatest decade for film and stuff like that. Well, I'm not trying to have this argument tonight. There were a lot of really bad movies that also came out in the 70s. And you know, maybe if we really did some extensive analysis, we could determine that it is, in fact, the greatest, whatever. But there were a lot of really bad movies that decade too. And you know, it's just, yeah, there are so many horrible, unreadable comics coming out now. There also were in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and etc. So
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Some of them are so bad, like they're great to read because you can't believe how terrible they are.
oh yeah,
I think it's one of those things that every medium suffers from is, or doesn't really suffer from it. It's actually benefits from in some way is time. Because as time goes on and things go further down the memory hole, the things that remain are the best of the best, right? So when you think of like 70s movies, you think of like, oh yeah, that was Star Wars, Jaws, Godfather, Alien. Like you think of all these great movies and you forget all the trash because it went down the memory hole. And so it was sifted through, and only, you know, the good stuff remains. And so it has this appearance of like, wow, man, the 70s was just full of amazing stuff. It's like, no, everything. But today, you know, we remember all the movies that came out last year and we go, man, modern movies are just trash because they're all fresh in your mind. You know, in 20, 30 years, we're only going to remember the handful of good movies.
Yeah, this is why no one remembers the Anna Nicole show.
Oh dang!
There was an Anna Nicole show.
Wow.
You don't remember? You're older than me.
I don't.
You should remember the Anna Nicole show.
That's because it went down the memory hole. I only remember the Paris Hilton show.
Wow.
Wow.
As if. Or that's hot. That's hot. That's what you're
Hot. That's hot.
That's hot. Yeah.
Hot.
As if was clueless.
Yep.
But,
let's see. There's some comments. Jimmy says the only time you're allowed to use the N word is when the word is no or necrophilia. That got really weird, Jimmy.
That was extremely weird.
I don't know what to say about that. Let's see. How do we piss off fans so much that they buy a book in spite? Oh wait, just ask Marvel. Important to be honest with your passion, says Dominic. I 100% agree. The pictures make. Oh, you guys talking about Foo Fighters? What? How did
the Foo Fighters? Holy cow! This is getting. Y'all making all of the early 2000s references right now.
Oh,
Josie and the Pussycats is still one of the best comic book movies.
All right, I'm gonna take your word for that one.
I saw that in theaters.
You're a brave man.
It was a lot of fun.
I have a feeling you saw it in theaters and there was more to the story.
I mean,
I'm not gonna ask you to elaborate on the details. So new comics, just because since it is New Comic Book Day, I think it'd be fun we can get back into open discussion about things, but I'd like to talk about the new comics that come out every week. We got League of Comic Geeks up on the screen, and they sort there's all the new books that came out, sorted in order of most subscribed to by League of Comic Geeks members. So this week, Flash was the #1 book, which is quite surprising as a $4.99 issue. That this was #1. X-Men 19 is #2. X-Men, of course, being very popular. Tom King's Batcat is #3, and his Strange Adventures #4. So now this is not translating into sales. This is straight just the users of this site. It obviously there could be twisted thing. It could be that people that use this site are all Tom King fans. So that could be twisting the thing. I still think it's interesting to say that at least the members of this site very enthusiastic about these certain books. Also crossover by Donny Cates. Captain America 28, very highly subscribed book. Spawn, which honestly I think Spawn should get more attention.
That Flash book, I will say that Flash book is pretty justified being the top spot. That was it was a pretty solid issue.
Well, I don't remember. These are not based on how much that individual book was liked. This is people subscribing to the book, so it's their excitement based on past performance.
Gotcha.
I guess.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. So like, if they subscribe just because they dug Joshua Williamson's Flash. Okay, I get it now.
So Spawn is number 7, which, that's good to see be in the high thing because it's only $2.99. And it's not only $2.99 because it's a garbage book and they just pay, they get no art or anything. It's a high quality, at least production wise, book. Your taste will of course vary on the material itself, but
sure.
While DC's raising Batman books to $5.99, Todd McFarlane's still holding strong at $2.99. Was it towing the line? Wait, what was that thing?
Holding the line.
He's still holding the line at $2.99. As a matter of fact, man, that'd be hilarious if Todd used that as a marketing thing.
It would be
to just throw it in DC's face. And Department of Truth is number 8. Very, very much excitement. Beta Ray Bill, it's a number 1 issue, so that of course can throw things askew. X-Men Legends. I'm surprised Decorum is as high as it is. That's encouraging. That's the only book that I have this week on my pull list. Any other books? I'm just kind of scrolling down. Firefly is still running at issue 27.
I picked up that one.
It's been going. I saw a couple of people tweet about Silk number 1.
I'm really surprised.
I didn't realize
that back.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta have enough for a trade for when Into the Spider-Verse 2 comes out, I guess, because they'll probably throw Silk into that.
Yeah, I just thought they got rid of her because she was kind of getting in the way of the other, like, I think the Gwen, or the Ghost Spider, God, it's still a stupid name. That, it felt like that she was kind of getting in the way, so they were like, let's sweep her under the rug. That was the impression I felt when they got rid of her before.
Well, to quote Star Wars, no one's ever really gone.
Okay. I was going to try to quote the let go of the past, burn it if you must, or whatever, but I can't remember that quote because, reasons. Let's see.
Let the past die, kill it if you have to.
Oh, speaking of comics that I don't hear Jimmy talking about, and I'm like quite surprised, there's a new Hellboy series. Young Hellboy.
Oh, yeah, Young Hellboy? Yeah.
Is that like Young Sheldon?
I guess. if Sheldon was a demon. This is something that seems pretty cool for my interest. I'm not a big Hellboy fan. Not because I'm anti-Hellboy, just I've never given it the proper opportunity. But Mignola's writing it, and I'm just shocked.
There's dinosaurs.
I haven't heard Jimmy talking about this book, so I'm calling him out. Dominic wants to know how Department of Truth is performing. I don't know. I don't have those numbers. You can go to comicron.com and check out the numbers. Seems like it's popular though. It's being well received. It's definitely up there in the opinion charts if you look at Comic Geeks.
Oh yeah, and James is a great guy.
Nice.
He's fun to
Well, that's why I buy comics. It's purely based on their personal characteristics.
There you go. I got another story here. Is I was friends with his girlfriend for years before they ended up dating. Although James was briefly on OkCupid, and I totally sent him a message on there, just being like, "Hey, I've seen you around." But anyway, so I knew his girlfriend for a long time. Because she used to work at Midtown Comics, and I would come and bring her like cookies or something like that, and we just like hang out. And I actually gave her first paid comics work, paid her to draw a 4-page comic for me for the first anthology I was published in.
Oh,
So, so yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
I have not heard of this book by John Arcudi and Dave Stewart, Two Moons, but I'm very shocked. Is that a Confederate flag on the cover? That seems
Looks like
very controversial.
Could be.
Any new books that you guys see here? Pictures stand out to you? It's interesting. Maybe you haven't read, but maybe you're gonna check out later. Didn't know it came out.
I saw U.S. Agent #4 on there. I picked that one up. I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah.
That's about it, though. I mean, not that many books on my pull list these days, anyway. And I did see Two Moons at the comic shop. I also saw. I've been looking into Redneck, which is a Donny Cates book. I think it's on issue number 30.
I got a Redneck story with Donny Cates for you.
Oh, here
Please tell me, because I can't stand that book. So please tell me.
I'm just
wow,
you know, part of me wants to just make this a bit. The problem is I do have stories, so. But eventually,
real quick, before you do it, hold on. Yeah. Ash, you see that comic up there, Dragon Age, Dark? So that's one I was looking for today because I love the video game series. My LCS on their Facebook page, they post every new comic day. They post all the titles of all the books they got in, and Dragon Age was one of them. So I rushed over to the LCS after seeing that. I was like, hey guys, I saw the Facebook page. Y'all still have any of those Dragon Age books? And the owner of the store was working. He's like, no, we didn't get those in. I was like, oh, but it was on your Facebook. Somebody put it. He was like, yeah, no, that was a mistake. We don't have them. I was like, son of a. So anyway, I'm sorry. I wanted to get that.
No, you're good. So for a little while, I was writing at geeksout.org. I still edit their their articles and stuff like that over there, but I was writing, doing some comic reviews, and I did a review of Redneck, the issue. This is probably like 3 years ago now, or whatever, when they had like the Pride variants. And, I mention in the review, I'm like, just so everyone's clear, these are like Pride variants. There's no actual like queer characters in this book. Like, don't pick this up thinking that this is like a queer book. This is just like fucking vampires. I wrote it more eloquently than that. So Donnie DMs me after he reads this, and he goes like, hey, I just want you to know that like in a few issues I am planning to like have a character like come out. Like there are going to be queer characters. It's just, I just want you to know that. And I was just kind of like, okay. And that's my only interaction with Donny Cates.
Wow.
That sounds close to his interaction with EVS that he had. Like very curt, very like defensive, like very much trying to cover his bases. Like almost kind of robotic even. It's so interesting.
I was just like, all right. Like,
I think Donny Cates is still a young guy. And I think
he's like 2 years older than me.
You're a young guy, Skip.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. He comes off as a young guy, at least.
So immature is what
mentally,
you're saying.
Like, yeah, just still living like under the ideas and the view set, the viewpoints of like someone who's maybe early 20s. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the guy. I just know what it's like being at that age. And the reason I say that is because he comes off really insecure. And part of me suspects, and this is purely suspicion, I have no knowledge about the guy to base this off of, but I suspect that the guy maybe was kind of a nerdy, unpopular type of thing, like going through high school and stuff. He wasn't like one of the popular kids. He's not, so he's got social awkwardness because of that. And I think what happened is he kind of shot up into stardom in his own microverse, which is, you know, Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
And now he's older and he's kind of going for like the cool hip look and everything. He's, you know, I would say he's probably a good looking guy, you know. And so I think now he's like a late bloomer and he doesn't know how to deal with it. So people are like, man, Donny Cates is like the coolest and everything. Oh, that's my phone. Sorry about that. And I just think he's not used to dealing, and he's really overcompensates. And I don't mean that in the way like that traditionally it's meant. Like, I think he overreacts to criticism or anything like that because he's so deathly afraid the pendulum's going to swing back, you know, the other way.
Yeah.
And it's like, ease down, buddy. Because I criticized him. Geez, it was like probably a year ago. I don't even remember what it was now. But it was very mild criticism, you know, because I like the guy. I promote his books, and he came back. It was on Twitter, super defensive. And I was like, whoa, calm down. Like, I'm, you know, I had to basically say back to him, like, calm down, just okay. And I don't remember how things even went. I just sort of walked away quietly because I didn't want to get into an altercation that I was going to be basically like, F you, Donny Cates. I'm never going to buy your books again because I triggered him to like say something nasty to me. I didn't know where it was going to go, and it wasn't positive. So I was just like, I'm just going to back away quietly so that I can still have a positive viewpoint of the guy and continue to enjoy his books. Because despite my nature, I'm very... You know, I'm very, maybe some people think me as conflict oriented. I'm very contentious, very salty, things like that. It's just because of my opinion. I don't actually have motivations to hurt people or to piss them off or things like that. I absolutely don't. I just have this. What are the kids calling it now? It's a very based mindset. Am I using that term correctly?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, there we go. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, I think he, you know, is rightfully nervous sometimes with this kind of stuff because things do go crazy, and there are elements out there that are looking for any excuse to knock people off their perch, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I get
what?
it.
He's trying to knock off Perch? We got to get this guy.
Funny.
All right.
Yeah.
So now that we've raked Donny Cates over the coals, let's see. Dominic says young Hellboy looks interesting. Well, have some enthusiasm about it, Dominic. Jeez. Jimmy says I talked to Skip about young Hellboy, and I can say that it really is like a young Hellboy. The best thing I can say is that it's just okay. Your favorite comic character ever, written by one of your favorite writers ever, is just okay. Jimmy, I'm disappointed in you. So disappointed. See, Dominic says DC should have picked a different writer for the other history of the DC universe. No, I think DC, other history of the DC universe is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. I mean, I agree. It's a lot of people aren't going to like it. And so you, from that standpoint, you can say, I wish it was someone different. But honestly, I think the only people that want that book are the people that want to see what that book is actually currently doing. So I think it's actually hitting its target audience. I personally have the opinion that they shouldn't even be doing that. That comics that shouldn't. Why take that stance? Why make that fight? Right? Just make good stories, and we can tell stories about heroes and virtue and morality, and teaching kids right from wrong. I don't see why we need to constantly keep putting, you know, the culture war and writing basically textbooks to try to convert people to your side of the culture war.
Is the book about the culture war, though?
Well, it's, you know, it's the other side of the DC universe and basically how blacks have been kept, you know, down by the man. And look at all these valuable black characters that don't get their say. I don't know. It's just, it comes off in a really bizarro way. Like, and again, we've talked about this in the past. Like, I think Perch is actually the one that makes this point really well all the time. Like how in the 80s, the most popular book in comics, X-Men, was led by a black woman. At the same time, the Avengers was also led by a black woman. And no one was waving any flags and saying, look at us and get us our virtue points. And they were selling like hotcakes, and fans were happy, and it was all good. And no one started hating oh my God, we're disparaging minorities, until people started making these accusations. And then once the accusations got made, people started looking for those, looking for the truth, not looking to see if they were true, but looking for the truth. And when you do that, when you look for something, when you're looking for something to back up your idea, if you have that's confirmation bias, if you look hard enough, you'll find it. Right? And
sure.
And it's just, this was not something that needed to be done. Comics were winning this war. Like, not winning the war, it wasn't really a war, but comics were already like broken free. Some people can argue that maybe the Oscar, the whole hashtag Oscars too white or whatever, maybe you could make some arguments of, say, 75 years in a row, the Oscar, okay, whatever. But comics was wide open for a long time, right? Were they quote unquote woke? No, but they didn't need to be. And I think if we would have just kept going on the same route and just treating people as equals and just doing like, hey, you know what? Let's not actually try to promote race as one race is disparaged over the other or anything, and just treat people like they should be treated. And that works, right? Like, we didn't need to make a statement. We just needed to set an example. And I think for Marvel Comics, at least, their part, and I think DC probably for the most part too, though I didn't read it, so I can't verify for sure, were setting good examples. They just weren't waving flags and saying, hey, look at us, look at how woke we are. We're no, it's cool. You were doing cool things. People talk about all the time, like before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and before the MCU revolution, Marvel's best movie and most popular was Blade. A whole trilogy of a D-list character. Because no one actually, I mean, I'm going to say no one. That's a blanket statement. Obviously, there are twisted people in the world. But in most part, no one really cares. In Western society, we're pretty liberated. And we're cool. And I think Wesley Snipes was a superstar for a reason. People weren't just like, Wesley Snipes, his skin color's wrong, I ain't going to watch his movies. Yes, are there people like that? Yes, but they're living in a rock somewhere. And there's that mindset for every creed out there that looks at someone else wrong. But they're small. The culture was promoting like, that's stupid. And if you are going to behave that way, you're going to live not because you're being canceled, but just because society was like that. We don't have time for that. And if you want to live like a buffoon, then you can go off and live in a swamp somewhere and have your stupid ideas, and we're just moving on. But now it's like we're drawing a light to every small, tiny infraction. Like we talked about Ed Piskor earlier, like he said the bad thing. Oh no. And it's like, I should have realized that there was something to that nature. And it's like, I don't think the problem really is there. We're making a mountain out of a molehill. That's my opinion. Probably different than everyone else's.
I think that I think some of that applies like what you're directly saying applies more to your like Captain Marvel comics. Your kind of comics that are very much like, oh wow, look at how great we are. Everyone loves Carol Danvers. Look at this. We're so great. Where something like the other side of the DC universe, like this is a kind of book where I think it's whether people get it or not. This is off to the side. It's not intersecting any other book. It's more like it's almost like more like informational, informative, not informational, but it's more that kind of thing. And I feel like that's something that shouldn't really ruffle any feathers. It's like it's not intersecting. It's not. They're not pushing the book as we're stunning and brave. That's not like the marketing behind it. And so I feel like something like that doesn't necessarily apply in the same way.
Well, I think the stunning and brave stuff, we've moved past that phase. And now we've moved to the, okay, yeah, it's no longer stunning and brave. We have to admit that it's now been several years that we've been stunning and brave. We can no longer do something like have a trans character, for example, and be like, oh my God, that's never been done. Because you've moved past that. So now what my opinion is that it's moved to the shaming stage. Like, we are on the right side of history. We're writing a book that's on the right side of history. And it's in the, not every book's this way, but many books are, where there's an undertone of like shame on you if you don't agree with what we're doing in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on you if you don't think Captain Marvel should be just the bestest of the best, perfect all the time. If you have a negative thing to say about Captain Marvel, it's probably because you're a white male bigot. Like, that's
shame
the undertone.
on you if you don't think there's any reason that Alan Scott, who's been around for 80 years, shouldn't suddenly be gay.
Mm-hmm. And that
Like,
tone is reinforced when you have things like Brie Larson, when the Captain Marvel movie was being made, and she would say stupid things like, I don't need to hear the opinions of some 40-year-old media guy. And I was like, what? Like, what does any of that matter? But it's clear that there's an agenda there. Now, how much they put it out there, people see it differently. But once you become sensitive to it, it starts becoming more and more blatant, and it's tough to swallow. And I just don't understand. Like, it's not, my opinion is like, it's not necessary. We're not living in the 1850s, right? Where there really were problems and we really did have to reform society. And we did. Now, is society perfect? No. And it's never going to be perfect as long as humans are in charge, because we're not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But the best thing I believe that we can do is just try to do a good example. Quit trying to shame other people in the work that you're doing. Let the work be the example, and not pointing to itself, because that's vainglory. Vainglory is the opposite of virtue. Anytime if you're trying to point to yourself, you're being the opposite of virtuous. And I think for a lot of people, it's off-putting, and it takes you out of these stories. But on the other hand, I think that there's people that really feel slighted. And I'm not trying to take away from anyone's experience. I don't know. I've never walked in any of these people's shoes. And I do feel that a lot of people have real concerns or real perspective of, things are wrong in the world and they don't like it. And I'm not necessarily trying to say like they're wrong for feeling that way. I just think the way that it's being dealt with is wrong. Let's just, in a really hippie kind of way, just hold hands and sing Kumbaya instead of swinging fists and being like, shame on you, you neo, N-word. Like, I don't know. It just everything feels so vile all the time. And it's more about really being against someone else than it is trying to promote something. I don't think like what Captain Marvel's trying to do is be like, see, look, women are great. It's not doing that. It's actually feels like it's hating men.
At the risk of prolonging this conversation,
we can move on.
I don't want to keep going at this. I'm just going to throw out something here, and then we can kind of wrap that up. But do you think that maybe there's an element of this where and I'm not saying it's just you. I think there's a segment of sort of people who are aware online that it might not necessarily be entirely what, whatever company is trying to do, but because of being like, hyper aware, being online and things like that, that opinion piece
thing. I personally wouldn't have taken that tone. I do easily understand why he felt that way and why that tone was taken. But
Sure.
John Ridley and I have different personalities, even though, obviously both black men. But I would have gone about it personally in a different way. I understand why he took that route that he did. I mean, and I can only speak for me as a person. That's the type of book that'll, turn me off. Do I feel like, again, do I understand why he feels the way that he feels? Yes. Do I understand why he used some other characters to kind of put his voice into them, even though some of it, like some of those things, if you go back and you read some of those old comics, those notions were there, but I definitely feel like John Ridley might have amplified them up a little bit. but at the end of the day, I think, it comes down to, does this book speak to you? That's kind of how I always bring it back. Does this work of art speak to me, whether it's about something political, whether it's about something personal, whether it's about something fantastical, whatever. And the book didn't speak to me, but I'm only one person, and I don't know how many people, and I never looked at the numbers of it being sold, but I know that there are some people that it does speak to. And I kind of end up like leaving it at that. Like, okay, you feel this way about it. I feel this way about it. My buddy was telling me about a movie that I intend on watching, but his explanation made me feel better about it. It was that One Night in Miami, where it's got Sam Cooke, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, and Malcolm X, and they were all together in One Night in Miami. And it's interesting because they all wanted the same thing, but they had all these different ways to go about it, and it was like a war of ideals. I'm always interested in media that deals with like a war of ideals. It's so interesting to me. But I mean, ultimately, that's kind of the world that we live in. I truly do think majority of people, humans on this planet, all want majority of the same thing. They want, health and prosperity for their family and friends, and ultimately, for the most part, for the world to be a better place. And like Ash said, there's a much smaller contingent of people that maybe don't want that, and are more of the not so helpful parts of society. But even the helpful parts and the people that truly do want to contribute don't always agree on how to bring that about. And the best thing that we could do for ourselves as a society is try to look past that sometimes and say, hey, even though I don't agree and we don't agree on that thing, what's the common ground that we can find, so we can find some way to make this place better and live happily. So I hope ultimately that's the attitude that most people take.
Sure. And I mean, I've talked to some writers straight up, not for the books we're talking about right now, but some other books that people who writers who have gotten talked about a lot by certain YouTubers. I'll leave it at that. And
Right.
I've talked to some of them, and I'm not going to say every instance in their writing, but there are plenty of instances in their writing where they've told me, like, hey, look, I just wrote a script, got paid, and people read into what I was trying to say.
Definitely.
I ain't saying that. If they want it, they can think whatever they want. They can. I don't care. If they saw something in it, great. But I was just writing a fucking adventure story with character. I don't know what people are talking about. Even if they agree with the things people that latched on and said, oh my God, this is great, this is progressive and stuff like that. There have been plenty of times where they're like, I have no idea where the fuck they thought that, but all right.
Do you think, I don't want to linger on this topic too long, but do you think that it could be subconscious? I don't think necessarily every writer is out there being like, I'm going to write my manifesto on, the culture war in my comic. But I do believe that these guys are kind of an insular group. They read each other's work. They influence each other through their own works. And I'm just wondering, when I write, I try to bring parts of other writers that I admire into my own. Like I use that as kind of a guide point, like emulation. Like, oh, I love how they do this. I want to copy that. So I'm just wondering if maybe some writers are doing this and inadvertently making a perception like this, just because that's just sort of the norm now. That's just how, especially in comics, like how it's done. And I was watching. Oh, real quick, I was gonna say I was just rewatching the MCU, and going back to the beginning, and I was like, man, I had forgotten how some of this stuff was in there from the beginning, because it wasn't so prevalent at the time back in like 2009 or whatever it started. Like we weren't thinking. And now that we're, you get through Endgame is done and you see everything, you're like, oh, some of this kind of underlying subtext, very, very, very faint, but as it went on, like you could just see, I don't know, you could almost see like the threads of it, like starting. And again, I think it's because if you're just sensitive to it, and I think maybe it flows both ways. Maybe it's the writers being inadvertent, or maybe it's being the readers reading into things.
What in the MC, like what aspects of it are you like?
I'm just talking
give
about
me an example.
I'm trying to think of I knew you were going to do this to me.
It's called having a conversation, Ash.
I know. And if I was 10 years younger, my brain would function and be able to recall these things very, very, very good. I used to be a smart guy.
Jesus.
I'm trying to think of an example specifically to it, but it's just some of the subtle things that we have to do now. Like we have to constantly like emotionally validate the female characters, like. Like have a strong male character be like, no, you're the best. You're the number one. I really admire you. Couldn't do this without you. That you don't ever see the other way around. Not anymore. Well, I'm saying not ever, but in general terms, it's very rare that you will have like a female character doing that to a male character. Most of the time, it's actually, and I have this theory, that male characters are always either written as total lovable buffoons, lovable, good guys, but just basically need to have their diapers changed. Like they need a mommy to take care of them. But they're
himbos are in.
That's what I was gonna say. They're called himbos now, Ash.
And they're so in.
Jesus.
Forget dad bod. It's himbos.
Jesus, I can't.
Thor. That's what Thor is now. Thor is a himbo. I've been told.
Or they have to be the super hyper masculine, toxic, just, like it's two sides of a coin. It's there's no real shades anymore. And that's how so many things are portrayed, like in modern media, especially in the comic book kind of spectrum. It just feels like, wow, if you aren't one of those two things, it just, look at it. Just when you start looking for it, you'll start seeing how evident this is. And this has been something that's been around since the changing of sitcoms in the 2000s, right? Became a big popular thing, like where every sitcom had some guy who's like a total idiot and has like a super hot wife, and she's super smart and handles everything, takes everything, and he just kind of fumbles through life and couldn't get through without you,
Well, there's a lot of trends.
Like the Honeymooners?
No, the Honeymooners. Oh my God, that'd be canceled today. Can you imagine a husband saying, "I'm gonna smack you to the moon, Alice"?
One day, Alice.
One day, he's gonna raise your hand to a woman.
Yeah. That show's not finished in the first season.
But what was it? I mean, first off, the most jarring thing, I don't care what anyone says, the most jarring thing about the MCU now is you watch that first Iron Man movie, and in the first 10 minutes, there's someone taking a picture with something that isn't their phone and talking about posting it on MySpace.
That's true. Iron Man is really, really good. That first movie, it's almost funny because that was one of the ones I recently watched, and I was like,
yeah,
I don't think they would make Iron Man today like they did. It would be a totally different movie. There's so many things in this movie that they
If they made Iron Man today, Tony Stark would not be this revered hero that he's been propped up as for the past 10, 12 years.
Well, he wouldn't
have. If you did the first movie, they'd be, oh, he hits on all the girls. He's a womanizer. He's toxic.
Well, they wouldn't have wrote him that way. That's what I'm saying. They would have wrote him as a more sensitive, liberated man.
Oh, well, yeah.
Pepper Potts would have been much stronger in the beginning.
Yeah, right.
Anyways.
Wow, that was a really good Britney joke. Fuck all y'all.
I caught the toxic reference.
Well, they say toxic and womanizer, so I was like, oh
yeah, womanizer
Britney's
too.
Biggest hits.
I actually bought that song. Gloss over the fact that you're a Britney fan, and I was just hoping no one would notice.
It's Britney, bitch. Come on.
I was just thinking that in my mind. That's how she starts that one song.
Look out for you guys. Look, I'm trying to change the topic. For the crowd's sake.
It's "Give Me More" is the one where she starts.
Give me more. Give me more.
Anyway, so
stay tuned next week for the Britney stream.
Britney alone.
But with what you're saying, I'm gonna come back at it from another way here. The same arguments you're making. You talk to someone with a different ideology from you, and what they say about the MCU movies is they are indoctrinating people into the military-industrial complex. Captain Marvel is Air Force propaganda. These movies are enforcing, or teaching our children to support violence, and that that we should be the hegemony in the world, and all this stuff, and like that is out there, and you can search Twitter, and there is plenty of stuff talking about how these movies are actually far right movies and are indoctrinating people in that direction. So do you think that maybe they're reading into it in a way like they're overreading into it, and then on that same token that maybe there are elements that yourself and other people that are seeing it that way might also be potentially over embellishing, and that it lies somewhere maybe more in the middle, where it's not quite as far as either people are saying.
There's probably some truth to what you're saying, but I would point out one major thing, that it's not like this has been something in the past 10 years, like, oh, the MCU is indoctrinating people into the military industrial complex. I'd say the people that are making these complaints and having that ideology and seeing that problem would make that statement about all the movies going in the past. Like, nothing's changed. They would look at, they would look at movies like Top Gun and be like, oh, look at that, just trying to, glorify military violence, and so that ideology, in my opinion, has had that viewpoint, just period, not just about recent films. Whereas maybe someone who's coming from my perspective is saying this is something that's only in the past 10 years has really started to make itself evident. You don't find this problem going back before then. And I'm making the connection that the reason is precisely because of the people, the other ideology bitching about, oh, this is just all pure propaganda, blah, 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 blah. And so now you've got people who are in that industry that also feel that same way, influencing the creation of this media and trying to steer it. Now, they haven't 100% flip-flopped it. Comics, in some cases, they have. I mean, sometimes you can buy a comic and, like, literally, Mark Russell did a Harley Quinn comic that was a giant FU to Comicsgate, like, in the comic. Like, he just wrote a anti-Comicsgate comic. And I was like, wow, this is nuts. I can't believe. Now, when you're dealing with $200 million movies, one person doesn't have the ability to just do that. There's too many hands in the pot, sort of thing, too many chefs in the kitchen making decisions. Whereas a comic book, like, one guy can just totally steer something. And so you see much starker changes. But as the movie industry goes and more people start getting into it, and that ideology starts being, more saturated into that, you're starting to see it become more and more and more. And I think it's precisely because what you said, because they do have those viewpoints. They've had these viewpoints. I don't know how long they've had those viewpoints, but their viewpoints can extend back indefinitely throughout the past, because to them, we live in a white patriarchy and it's ruled by the military industrial complex, and all this big, it's been the problem since the dawn of time type of thing, and they need to change it. Whereas my perspective is like, no, we just need to stop trying to change this. That's part of the problem, and it's more complicated than that. I'm simplifying it. I don't want to beleaguer this topic too much, because I'll just go in the weeds and stop even making sense.
Get out of the weeds, Ash. Get out of the weeds. Come back to the sidewalk.
Skip had a really good topic that he
he did. Skip had two. Both of his topics were really good.
I thought it would be good discussion.
Were they anything and else?
This guy Joe is so perceptible, so perceptive.
That's a good one. I like that.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, they were. He asks, what do you favor more? Art? In what do you favor more in a comic book, in the medium of comics? What matters more to you? Art or the writing? First come, first serve.
See, back when I first got into comics, I would say art in a heartbeat. It was all about the artwork, because like I was picking up Justice League or Avengers or Fantastic Four, and it was all just based on what the artwork was. I didn't care for like the back issues. Like I just picked up the Korvac saga. Use Avengers as an example. I picked up the Korvac saga today. When I first got into comics, who was it that had done the pencils? George Perez did some of the pencils in this, and
He did some of it,
Sal Buscema, Dave. See, back when I first got into comics, I was like in my mid to late teens, and that art just did not appeal to me. I didn't, there were artists like Mike Diodato. I liked Alex Ross, Dale Eastman, Ed Benes, some of the more modern artists. So I had tons of floppies and trades of these issues of Spider-Man or Fantastic Four, just whatever. Not all those stories were great, though. I actually ended up donating or giving away or selling a good chunk of my collection, because as I grew and matured as a reader over the years, I realized, the art might be all right, but the story's not that great. And also over time, as I matured, I grew to appreciate those older back issues, those artists, the, Jim Sterankos and Jack Kirby and all those, different older artists. Yeah. So nowadays, I'm going to have to say I favor the writing than the art.
I don't think Breen's in the chat for you to impress with all that.
Yeah, I know. He's got another stream going on. I just thought about that while I was like, oh, Breen will be proud of me. No,
Breen's got a little tear in his eye.
Somewhere there's a little bell ringing. He's like, an angel just got his wings. But no, that's seriously though. I think it's a maturing process almost as a comic reader. When you're a kid, you don't. I mean, I assume this is this way. If you're a small kid and you're picking up comic books, you're more drawn to what the art style is. You don't really probably necessarily care about the writing or the plot or lack of characterization or whatever. You just want something that looks cool. And then as you grow, you start to realize, oh, hey, this writing is great, or this writing is not so great. So but
no, it's absolutely true. I mean, when you're a young, stupid kid, you're impressed by things like Jim Lee on X-Men, and then we grow up and we get over that.
Exactly. You can only get so far on looks. It's like when you're in high school and you're just wanting to date all the pretty girls, but then once you get older, you're starting to look for someone that you can actually settle down and have a conversation with. It's kind of similar to that. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Is this why I'm still not married again?
Sometimes you can have both now. You can have good art and good writing. I'm finding it to be a little bit more rare sometimes. But
well, yeah, the rarity's baked in because they're always cycling out artists. At least with Big Two stuff. It'll be like, oh, we have this artist for 2 issues, and then a fill-in artist, and then 2 more issues, and then 3 issues of a fill. That's
right.
It's when it gets that uneven that's an issue.
Yeah, right.
So Dragon Majesty in the chat says that he chooses writing over the art. Jimmy also chooses writing. Dominic says he favors writing. Seems to be a prominent thing. I think modern industry as a whole seems to be much more writer driven than it used to be. I would say that that's really a tough question for me, because I want to say, my gut says I want to say that I'm art driven, but I feel like the art today is, on a whole, not individually, there's some great artists today, but on a whole, I think the art has taken a downturn. And so the bar for me is like lower. So it's like when I go into McDonald's, I don't expect to get a world-class meal. I expect to get something that's good for McDonald's level, And so when I pick up a comic these days, I just kind of hope that it's good by today's standards. I'm not ever going to, I'm not going to say never, but I'm saying I don't expect to pick up Jim Lee art books. Like it used to be once upon a time that Jim Lee was doing a monthly book. You could pick up X-Men every month, and there was Jim Lee, right, doing it. And you could pick up Spider-Man. There was Todd McFarlane. And like you could do that once upon a time. And now you're lucky that even the top artists might do like a mini series. And it's just, you're like, okay, whatever. And so writing has sort of had to pick up because of that, I think. So yeah,
I'm also
go ahead.
I was saying, now I'm picturing you like going to McDonald's and telling the person, like, look, I'm not expecting a world-class meal, all right? Just hand it over.
Just give me the best you have.
Yeah.
Seriously, I just hope that the order is actually what I ordered.
That's true too. Yeah, when you have to look in your bag right as you get it at the drive-through window.
Seriously, the number one thing is sip your drink. So many times, like, you get the wrong thing, and you're like, no, I didn't order diet, or vice versa, or like.
Well, they have the big confusing, soda fountains now, where you press all the buttons and you can have whatever the hell you want.
It's also confusing is that they have all the these long ass drive-throughs these days, and most of the McDonald's in my area are like the double drive-throughs. So they never know who's even coming to the window, because it could be either, because it's 2 lanes that funnel into one.
Right.
So, and then they have all these drinks made ahead of time. So you might have it's so easy that gets mixed up. So easy. And like I said, like I can't count how many times I've like driven away, and in San Diego, everything is freeway. Like you don't drive streets pretty much. It's just, you're looking to the nearest on-ramp. It's just a huge network of freeways. And so by the time you even take a sip of your drink, you're already getting on the freeway, and you're like, oh, spit it out. It's like, it's Diet Coke or something you didn't order, but you ordered regular Coke. You're like, what the hell? And you're like, what are you going to do? Get off on the next exit, make a mute, come back, sit in the, like, it's like just for a drink. It's so annoying.
So what you do is, the second they give it to you, you look them right in the eye as you're sipping it.
I give the stink eyes. No.
All right.
No, but sometimes I will. I'll like sit and pop the straw in, take a drink before I like actually engage.
There you go.
To take off out of the thing. But yeah, but you can't check everything. The other thing is like cold fries. That's another thing my pet peeve.
Oh, that's terrible when you get the cold fries. Yeah, that's just. Ugh.
I usually snack on my fries as I'm driving home or whatever. So you're like driving, you like reach in, grab a fry, and you're like,
them either.
No, you can't.
Air fryer.
As soon as you do, they get all soggy. I need to get an air fryer. That's
gotta get an air fryer.
I gotta get an air fryer.
Just to feed your McDonald's addiction.
That's it.
So you can order
Kind of fries, really. Like if you need, if you need a defibrillator on your fries, you get an air fryer, pumps the life right back into it, get that heartbeat going again, and nice and warm and crispy. Dash them with a little extra sea salt, good to go.
So Ash, on a related note, do you ever deal with people like you talk about something like this and then like, someone has to say something like, I don't remember the last time I was at a McDonald's or something like that. And you just have to tell them like, fuck you.
I have had the first part of that statement. I try not to respond in the latter part. I'm already controversial enough. I don't have the ability to be like F you to people and like get away with it.
Yeah.
Some people have that sort of likable personality that, they just have enough charisma that they can tell people to like F off and then people still like them.
Don't I know it?
Yeah. I bet. Yeah. You seem like one of those people. Yeah, I'm one of those people that rubs people already wrong in the first place. So yeah, saying F you would just be deal breaker.
But you think it is the important thing.
No, I don't.
You shouldn't be rubbing people. That's where the police come in. They get you for that kind of stuff.
Only if it's without consent.
That is true. That is true.
Dominic says Five Guys and In-N-Out have quality food over McDonald's.
Yes, Five Guys. I love Five Guys.
Come on, that's a no-brainer, Dominic.
Yeah. I don't remember the last time I had Five Guys.
If I was in California, I would know.
So you are saying you have had Five Guys?
Yeah, I've had Five Guys. I was continuing
Quote,
the joke, but
quote,
yes,
Joe has had Five Guys.
I've had Five Guys. I've had In-N-Out. Not that often because I've rarely.
You've
been
had
out
Five
that
Guys
way,
In-N-Out.
I've had.
Moving on.
I've had
bad.
3 guys in my car. Is that where this is going?
Oh goodness, that's a good one.
I can't ever resist the Five Guys joke. It's one of the most terrible names for.
Unfortunately, one of the guys was in the passenger seat waiting for a ride home, but I'm still counting them.
Oh my God, there's a mom and pop burger place nearby that's called Beef and Bun, and I went there with one of my friends a long time ago, and I don't think he'd ever been there before. I was like, let's go to Beef and Bun. He's like, oh, you mean dick and ass? And I was like, I can never not think of that name.
Yep.
I'm able to because I'm an adult.
Oh, you're so mature. Yes, I have admitted I am not mature, so
that's true.
But I cannot go to my head, and I'm like, people should think about the names of their business.
Was it like a really old business? Like it's been around since 1935 or something like that?
Not quite that old, but I think it's been around since like the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a little mom and pop place. It's good.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say if it had been around for like a long amount of time, it could be that words words get different meanings today than they did back when that business probably first.
Oh, sure, it was like a much more innocent era and stuff.
Yeah, right.
I'm not too far away from All American. They still have one of those out here.
I'm not familiar with All American.
It's a cheap, burger and shake kind of place.
Nice.
It sounds like a very controversial place though. All American. I don't know.
Well, it's like it's like the Olive Garden when you're here, your family. Like All American, when you're there, you're American. It doesn't hold up in court.
It's I don't know. I just think being American is kind of a negative stereotype these days. Like you don't want to.
Oof.
Anyways.
Anyway, moving on. Do we want to get to Skip? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, did Skip? I'm sorry. Were you?
Skip had another topic that he had in addition to the one we talked about, art
did.
versus writers.
He did.
I didn't know if you wanted to go to that one or if you had a different one in mind you wanted to switch over to.
No, I want to switch over to the main topic that that I had on my mind was comics into TV shows. It seems like right now there's quite a few that are on. And in fact, there's a lot actually, but there's quite a few new entries. We've just recently had Falcon Winter Soldier. It's still airing. We've had Invincible has launched. You can now see on Amazon Prime. CW has launched their Superman and Lois show to pretty positive appraisal by the masses. Am I missing? Oh, there's Jupiter's Legacy.
Jupiter's Legacy is coming.
About to come
right?
out. I think next month. It launches through Netflix. Boys is out. We're currently working on a third season.
Basically, Marvel has a new show coming out right after the other. So as soon as Falcon and Winter Soldier ends, we'll get. I think Loki is the next one. Like they just come out one after the other now.
Right. The MCU stuff is going to be just sequential. But I'm just trying to think of all the comic TV shows.
Supergirl,
like Umbrella Academy.
Supergirl. The final season of Supergirl just came out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was kind of overlooking the CW because they've been out for years. But there's an influx of new. The Umbrella Academy is pretty new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was pretty good. I saw the first season. I hadn't seen the second one yet.
What is there any that I'm missing? That you can think of?
Not off the top of my head. I know. Well, I mean, there's the Harley Quinn cartoon. That's fairly new.
Yeah.
They're gonna have some stuff going to HBO Max that I think they're gonna start production on soon.
So one of the things I was thinking of is, it almost feels like comics are being replaced by TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's gonna be a point now where there's a huge saturation of comic book TV shows, and running the gamut of all ages, right? From your kids stuff all the way to your R-rated adult level content. Do we need comics anymore? Or can comics survive this? Now, obviously, like the niche comics, I've had this talk with Skip before about, comics as an art, as a medium. It's always going to have people that like to do comics. But I'm talking about the general mass success, right? Like vinyl LPs never actually went away, but they did die. As there were still a few artists that are like, nope, I'm going to still make an LP. You're like, okay, more power to you. But pretty much you had to go some specialty store to find these things or special order them. And it looks like maybe comics could end up going that route and just having the niche specialty indie books. But as far as like the more mainstream stuff, and by that I count the small publishers too. I think The Boys, still an independent book, it's kind of reached, when you have a TV show made out of your thing, you're kind of reaching mainstream status. Walking Dead is a mainstream book.
Yeah.
By my calculations. And I'm just wondering why should people buy comics? And I don't mean to collect, I mean like the normies. Why should normies go, you know what? I'm going to go check out these things called comics.
Because they should get their faces out of a screen for 30 minutes and actually read something on paper. Not that they will ever do that. No, you make an excellent point though. Yeah, I mean, at the point we're getting, I mean, those were just the newer shows we talked about. I mean, this has been going on for almost a decade, superhero shows. So probably even longer than that in some cases. So, I mean, yeah, it seems like it's, on the one hand, they're making these stories more accessible to a wider range of people, which, okay, that part's cool. But then, yeah, I mean, you see it at your LCSs. There's not a huge, you don't see every, Supergirl fan, to use her as an example. You don't see them all going to the LCS and buying out all the Supergirl related back issues or new titles or whatever. There's no crossover there. So yeah, I don't know. It definitely doesn't look, to me anyway, it doesn't look like it bodes particularly well for the industry. I think you kind of hit it on the head there when you compared it to the vinyls, because there are still vinyl shops and there are people who listen to records on vinyl. I listen to records on vinyl, but most people, we have, Spotify and iTunes and
Sure.
so It's a niche market that I think is what it's going to become, even more niche than it has been.
Right,
So,
but I mean, think of the question from the to the other angle. Are we going to see? I mean, not that it's not really a prediction. What I'm trying to do is, if I'm trying to make arguments for comics, I'm finding it harder and harder to tell people that they should try this out because a lot of the good comics are being made into TV series.
yeah.
Right? And for the most part, if you're a normie, if you're not, a diehard, obviously we're talking to comic fans. So it's easy for us to be like, well, yeah, the comics. But the average person, we're talking about getting people into this industry, like finding new viewers. And as a matter of fact, Joe was on a video earlier that Wes put out about DC and Marvel attracting new viewers. And this is kind of what made me think about this. Like, do they really need to get, not new viewers, new readers? Do they need to get new readers if they're just going to be pumping out a ton of TV shows? I mean, content is content. And if you're really not engaged in appealing to fans of a certain medium, if you're really not like, we're a lover of comics in general and we're committed to keeping this medium alive, you're just committed to selling brand, right? You're just committed to getting Spider-Man to be a profitable venture. That's what your goal is. Then it doesn't matter. You could be like, well, screw it. We could just keep them alive in TV shows. And now the independents are even doing that. I mean, like I said, the number of ones I mentioned, there's so many indie books that are being made. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's many other shows in development. Mark Millar in general has, he's pretty much most of his books, his franchises are at some level of development, which is kind of crazy to think about. But, and then how many other books are out there that have been optioned that could or could not potentially become something? I never know, but it seems like the TV industry is very interested, especially now with the streaming wars. These platforms kind of want their own IPs to draw fans to their platform, because it's no longer the day of cable where you just needed a solid show, at a certain time to own a time slot. If you had TV, you had TV. Like, everyone had all the channels, all the main channels. I'm saying, like, but with streaming, you may not have Disney Plus. You may say screw Netflix, right? So you may not have access to the same repertoire of content that your friends do or whatever. And so now each of these platforms are trying to vie for space and your dedication, your loyalty, and part of the way to do that is to have that sort of killer show or whatever that gets you to, like, for a while, Game of Thrones was selling HBO, right? People bought HBO just because they wanted Game of Thrones. I'm starting to see that Netflix, HBO Max, Disney Plus, they all want their things to be like, this is going to make people buy our service. They don't need everyone to watch everything on their service. They just need to get you to pay your subscription. It doesn't matter if you watch nothing, right? You can subscribe to Disney Plus and never watch a single show. They don't care. It's whether, do you have a subscription or not? And so it's changing the way that we view ratings, right? It used to be ratings really mattered because it was advertiser revenue and things like that. Now, ratings really don't matter. It's just, do you pay for the channel or not?
Right.
And it's kind of, that's with comics, right? Like, do you buy Marvel comics or you buy DC comics? I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking out loud. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's more of a. I think there's a more nihilistic take we can go from here. Of there's an overall entertainment bubble that's going to burst. The days of the same people watching, like 10, 20 million 25 million people watching the same show, that day is over. People watch less because it's all spread out. Very similar to comics. There's an oversaturation of comics. Each individual comic sells less. There's an oversaturation of TV. Everyone watches less of the same program. There's an advertising bubble. Like ads used to be what funded so much of this, and ad revenue is a fraction of what it used to be. No one's really making, and I mean, I think we touched on this on another stream, is, like even Netflix, it's like the kind of money they're making through their, subscription model. It's very flimsy. I mean, it wouldn't take that much for, let's say, a price hike to get a bunch of people to, stop, decide they're going to cancel their subscription, because you can just do that. It's not like cable where you're tied into all these crazy contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also don't have the ad revenue on top of that. So all this stuff is very flimsy, and could easily, a bubble could burst pretty easily at some point with not unrealistic chains of events happening.
I think that's a really good point, which I think for me kind of reaffirms my own thoughts that these platforms really need to train viewers into being loyal to their content. So I think that's a huge deal. I think that if you decide, Western culture and America in general is very brand oriented, right? I mean, we like throw, I don't know if other countries you can drive around and see people putting like product brand names on their cars and stuff. We're very much loyal to our brands. And once we decide like Apple's cool, let's say, we become like all in Apple. Yeah, Apple, and then oftentimes it can be very difficult to, not difficult, but it's, once you gain that allegiance, you kind of have to do something really bad to lose it. I think that the Apple of today is not nearly what Apple was when Jobs was running things, but it's still good enough. And the people who are lovers of the brand have had no real reason to forego it. So they're still chugging along. Like, I think Apple would have to do something really pretty bad, or someone would have to come along and just something really revolutionary in a competing space to change things over, right? Which is what, like Facebook example, Facebook and MySpace. It wasn't like MySpace was doing anything bad. It was just sort of there. And Facebook was like, ha, and it just stole everyone. I think that's what you want to do with these streaming services, is what you get someone who, if your idea is like, yeah, Netflix is awesome, then you're going to just keep paying your service. And it's prudent for Netflix to keep you loving that brand. It's like the whole Marvel Zombies thing, right? You know, that concept of like, they can put out these screwed up, stupid comics because the people who are into Marvel Comics, they see Marvel Comics as the cool comics, and it doesn't send them off because they made a stupid book. They just keep chugging along. Yeah, Marvel has to work really hard to lose their fans. And I think that's what the streaming services are. If they're not trying to do that, I think they should be trying to do that. And I think establishing these comic book labels, these IPs, are a big part to doing that, because not because they're comic book IPs, but because they're following the same model that worked for comics, which is kind of having this world, this franchise that you can invest in. I think MCU broke it wide open. You know, I think people want, it's a good example why people want Disney Plus. It's not just because WandaVision was good, or, you know, people liked WandaVision. They like the MCU. They're invested in the whole thing. And, you know, you might have a show that doesn't work, but the fans like, whatever, you know, I have all this other MCU that I still love it. Disney is going to have work really hard, I think, to piss off the MCU fans, to make them go like, I'm done with that. I don't know. Am I close to anything?
It's bigger than that, because it's just the MCU just being folded into the greater Disney. You know, I mean, who alive today doesn't have some sort of attachment in the US at least to Disney on some level, whether it's watching some of these movies, their animated classics as a kid, or some of their live action classics. I mean, they're very well ingrained.
That's for sure. I mean, yeah, the Disney brand itself, from the pure Disney stuff, is a huge enough brand as it is to get that. But owning MCU and of course Star Wars, those are two huge franchises that fans are invested in, that are beyond just like a single show, right? Like HBO used to have Game of Thrones, and then once Game of Thrones is over, people are like, screw this, I'm moving on. Like, it's not this perpetuating thing. But Star Wars and MCU are like living brands that are going to continue, right? Like WandaVision may be over, but now we've got a new MCU show, and then once that's over, we're gonna have a new MCU show, and so you constantly have this thing to look forward to. I think Netflix is trying to do something similar with the Millar thing, and hopefully, if like Jupiter's Legacy works, if they can get a couple of good shows and establish this Miller World thing, then people are like, oh, this Miller World stuff is cool. I want to keep getting into it. HBO Max obviously has the DC, so it confounds me why they can't get their act together on this. It's like, I know. Like, you guys are doing it all wrong. Like, you're screwing up your brand. I don't understand what HBO Max is doing. I don't know. Going back, I think we got a little off topic. Are the comics TV shows replacing comics though? Not for you and me per se, but just as a general like normie thing. Do people have even a reason to come back to comics?
England teams used this example before, and the more I kind of read certain comics, the more I think it's true. Writers aren't writing comics for comics' sake for in certain situations. They're writing for movies. A lot of these comics today, I think a lot of writers are hoping that it gets picked up by some studio and it'll be their big break, and they'll be able to make it'll be the next Walking Dead, or it'll be the next Invincible, or insert comic book title here. So I think that comic books, they might still carry on for a bit as as maybe a test launch, to kind of see like, hey, how does this title, how does this story resonate with the comic book readers? And if they like it, maybe they see that as an implication that, well, if they like it, then maybe normies would like a television show of it or a movie version of it.
Well, like, here's another example. Like, I want to go back. Like, it's not about should comics exist. I'm trying to get to the question of, I guess I'm feeling like I'm not putting this out there right. Berserker just came out. Mm-hmm. It's already been greenlit for a movie and an anime series. So why should normies come to the comic book shop and buy Berserker? Right? Like,
there's no reason to.
They don't. What I want to do is separate this, like, from your mind, comic book fans in general. I'm talking about people who just don't have comics in their life.
Okay.
They like comic book things. They love seeing like the MCU movies, maybe, or maybe they like the DC movie or whatever. But they're not actually like buyers of comics. Is there any reason for them to take the next step and say, well, I'm going to get some comics too? Or they can just live in the world that they currently live in, and eventually Berserker will come out as a TV show and they can consume it that way. They don't got to buy the Boys comic shop. Eventually, the Boys TV show will adapt what it does. I don't know. I'm just thinking that might be the way that it goes, because there's already so many comics. You can't read all the comics, and you don't want to anyway. I'm reading less and less books myself these days. And I'm finding myself watching more and more. I watched Invincible, for example. I watched the Superman TV show. I watched The Boys. I'm definitely going to be watching Jupiter's Legacy. That's an amazing comic book series. And it's not because I'm anti-comics or anything, but I'm speaking as someone who is pro-comics and finding myself like, I just already noticed that the post-2000 generation they grew up on like the DC animated universe, the Marvel cartoons. A lot of them, I talked to them about Spider-Man, and it was like, oh, that they just know the cartoons because that's what they watch. Like, they didn't need the comic books because they got their fix a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess answer in the form of a question: why should people want to go read the Hunger Games book after they've watched the movie? I think people that are into a medium are into that medium, and people that aren't into it just kind of aren't into it. There's kind of, I mean, you could bring up the notion of, well, how do we know that they're not into it when they haven't tried it? But what reasons do they have to try it?
Well, that's what I'm actually trying to get at. I'm not trying to make the argument that comics are not something that should be consumed or that people should stay away or anything like that. But what reasons,
no, I get it.
What reasons do they like?
There aren't many.
For example, good example, Hunger Games. At one point, I wanted to read those books, and then the movies came out, and then I saw the movies, and I was like,
right.
Oh, cool. I know how the story goes. I know the books are probably a little bit different. They might even be better, but I've seen the movies. I'm good now.
Exactly.
Moving on,
That's what it is. That's the reality of it. There really isn't much of an argument for comics. I hate to say it, but there isn't much of and I love comics, but there's not much of an argument for it. If something is going to come out in the form of in a more consumable, easier to access form, then there's not much of a reason to go after, unless you got into like the medium that you consume that content or that topic or those characters, that IP, whatever you want to call it, unless you got into it so deep to where you're like, I want more. And I'll take comics off of the table for a second. Let's say Star Wars. Wow, that was really great. I want to know more of, what was going on with like Darth Plagueis. Like this Darth Plagueis character sounds super interesting. Is there anything else out there where I can maybe learn more? The people that are like, it's even those people that are willing, and I mean, we could give an additional level. We could say there's one level deeper, but the people that are willing to even question and then search will find that information that they're interested in. And if that information was fulfilling, but they want to know even more than what they found in the Google search or Wikipedia or whatever, then they'll say, oh, there's some books. Oh, okay. Like, I didn't know that there was this Darth Plagueis book written by, I forgot whoever wrote it. It was a really good book. And then they go deeper into that. But outside of that, majority of the population are surface level when it comes to their information that they want to receive, whether it's entertainment or education. They're surface level. They want to know just enough to get the gist of it, to understand it, and then they're like, okay, cool, I got it. What's the other thing that people are talking about, or maybe what's the other thing that is similar to that I want to be interested in, and they move on to the next thing. So there's not much of a case for comics. Someone's just got to really, really, really want to go deeper, or they're going to have to be, already people that are into books, or people that are into art, and want to go deeper down that route. I do think that there's more of a chance for people that are watching an animated series to want, because it is animation, so it is some sort of sketched, motion art form. So they may want to go and go deeper into that because they're like, oh, okay, it's close enough. It's just that the pictures don't move. I move the pages. But
Right.
outside of that, there like just straight up, there's not really much of a case to want to go beyond that and read the comics. There's just not.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about the like extended universe aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that might be something that actually does happen with, say, like the Miller world, for example? Because it seems like he's been very interested in keeping like his Kick-Ass properties going. He no longer writes them, but he hires a creative team to do like an ongoing Kick-Ass book. So if you are like a fan of the movies, you can like then come and say, oh, I want more of this. There's only so many movies. Maybe, if you end up like, say, Jupiter's Legacy, you end up loving it. The TV show can only cover so much because it takes so much longer to develop a show versus putting out a comic. You can have like a supplemental, you can make you could just hire a writing staff and write a bunch of Jupiter's Legacy stuff, theoretically. I know it's not currently what's happening, but if the industry evolved to that, maybe you could see comics becoming more of a support structure.
If what industry evolved? If the comics industry evolved to that?
If the TV show industry that is pulling from comics, right? I mean, like, for example, we're already seeing Marvel making comics to support the spin-offs that have come, for their video game licenses, right? We had like the Avengers game tie-in comic, the Spider-Man comic ties into the game. You could start seeing like if Disney was doing, say, like MCU books, like, or MCU stories, having Marvel just exist to be like, yeah, here's our Falcon and Winter Soldier comic book that's a tie-in to the show. That's an extension, essentially. And instead of just trying to exist the way that it has in the past, be more of like, let's do extended stuff of the TV and movie content.
And no, not really. Like, if the medium that people, if the medium that people consumed it in was satisfactory, the majority of the people are not going to go past that. I mean, we've already seen the conversion rates of all this stuff. Like, that's just the behavior of the people. Now, as far as a business is concerned, yeah, it's not a bad idea if it if it doesn't cost you all that much to produce, that thing, then yeah, you can give that a shot and maybe hopefully, make some money, definitely break even, you would hope, but maybe make some money off of the people that are really already into the comics and just so happen to also play the game as well. But no, I mean, it's just because the other medium is already more accessible. Comics aren't even as accessible. Like, they're not as hard, but I mean, they're not as hard to get to if you're talking about the digital format. But again, thinking about like, I mean, and I guess you could say you can go on Amazon and get it mailed to you and all of those other things. But like, it's funny, and I know we don't think about it that much because we love comics, but same thing with books. Like, you turn on a TV show or a movie, and all you have to do is just sit there and let your eyes do the work. Like, it's laying everything out for you. Part of the reason why I think we love comics is that our brain has to do more of the work than if we were watching something else. Like, sometimes, even when there's, in an action scene, if someone went from one pose where they were throwing a strike, let's say in Firepower, and then the next pose, the adversary is throwing a strike their way and they have to parry or dodge or whatever, our brains do the work of what happens in between each snapshot, in between each panel. But that is work to do. And even sometimes we come up questions with ourselves where we have to read back over it and ask that. Not that movies and TV shows don't sometimes have that scene where people got to rewatch it, but it is, if we're just talking about processing power, it is less processing power. And we live in a day and age where people are only, frankly, getting lazier and lazier and want to be spoon fed more and more and want to have to hold the spoon and pull it to their mouths less and less,
We're
right?
becoming those people from Wally, pretty much.
Yeah, it's just one big Wally simulation. So just I'm going off of the behavior of people, the accessibility of comics, and then kind of where people have comics in their brain, as you know, at where the culture is now. And especially the United States culture. Obviously, in some other countries things are slightly different. Print in some countries, print media is still more accessible than trying to gain access to this platform that isn't even available in that country yet, and having to get a VPN and all these other things. For them, they still do gravitate towards books. But where we're at with technology, and that technology, as they say, our technology has surpassed our humanity, going to the point where we don't want to put that much effort into getting the satisfaction that we want out of our media. It's likely just not gonna go that route. Comics will pretty much be for the people that are into comics, and majority of people that get into comics are likely going to get into it because someone else they know is into comics and they showed them that one book that did really get them into it or whatever. But as far as it being like I don't really know anyone that knows comics, but me and all my friends are going to sit down and watch this Invincible TV show because I'm flipping through Prime and I done already watched everything else that's on my list. Okay, cool. That's it. They're like, okay, cool. I got my 3 episodes. Like that's as much of Invincible as I want now. What's going on Snapchat?
Right. Yeah, that pretty much sums up. I mean, basically, because I guess movies and shows, they can only lead people's. I remember it was one of the DC movies. I think it was Green Lantern, the terrible Ryan Reynolds one that I just reminded myself existed. They
Green
at the
Lantern.
end of the movie, they advertised a whole bunch of trades and DC comic stories, like a whole bunch of books. I was like, oh, that's actually kind of a cool thing. At the end of this, you advertise to all your people so all the normies know, hey, these are books that you can go find. And they're trades, so they're a little bit easier to find than your normal floppies, if you went to like a Barnes and Noble or something. But you don't even see that anymore. So the most exposure people are going to have to these is what they come across on streaming. And like you just said, people, they're going to get just enough to scratch that itch for them if they like the character or if they like the story. Now you might get a few cases of a super fan may somebody may decide they really love this character, or they want to explore more, then they might seek out. But even then, like you said, it's very easy. You just go on Amazon, you order a book, and it'll be at your house in 2 days. Doesn't mean that they're going to go find where their nearest LCS is. They're not going to go start collecting all the back issues, most likely. So yeah, I think that as comic fans, if we're friends with people that are the normies, we can recommend stuff to them. Maybe, it's almost like, we're little comic missionaries trying to get our friends into comics, kind of. It's like, hey, if you like Invincible, hey, there's this giant omnibus you can get. Or, it's like trying to convince your friend to drop $60 or more on an omnibus.
That's the key, though. That's a huge point. Like, yeah, spend $60 on the book, or you can watch on Amazon Prime and it's animated for free.
There you go. There you go.
That's a tough sell. And that's why I'm saying, like, once upon a time, like when I was growing up, the only real superhero film was Superman, and Superman, the Superman franchise. There was stupid films like the Dolph Lundgren Punisher and stuff that we didn't care about. But it wasn't until Batman '89 it was like, oh, wait, this is kind of cool. But still, by and large, comic book content was super rare. I remember being blown away, like when Rocketeer was coming out as a movie. I was like, oh my god, they're doing an independent comic movie, like crazy. But still, it's a one-off thing. So, as a fan of comics, both mainstream and indies and stuff, I wanted a lot more of that. So I stuck with the comics. I also felt the comics were in many ways better. So that was a big thing for me. Like, I was just happy if a movie was like half as good as the comic. I was like, yeah, cool.
Sure.
Nowadays, you get so many comics that I never like. Man, if you would have told me back in the day that they would make X-Men movies that are better than the comics, I would have been like, oh my god, that no way, that's impossible. Except nowadays, what I realize the truth of the scenario would be is the reason why the movies are better than the comics is because the comics are so bad.
Right.
Like, and I hate. I haven't even watched all the X-Men movies because I can't stand them, and yet they're better than the comics even for me. And that's kind of past. I think the TV shows are making a better success story. I think they're being more consistently well received, and more to the point, it's much more prolific. If you are a fan of comic book content, there's stuff out there, like a lot more available. So you don't have to have that downtime of like, oh, they made a Batman movie, maybe they'll make another one in a couple years. You know, like there's everywhere you turn. Oh, look, this show's coming out. Oh, that shows, you know, like the Disney Plus. As soon as WandaVision's over, Falcon Winter Soldier starts up. As soon as that's over, Loki's going to start. Like they're not giving you downtime. You're constantly having material to consume, which takes out one of those aspects that maybe people buy comic books for, is that extension of like, there's not enough, I want more. Well, now I don't need it. I have so much to consume. Why continue? And I must admit, like when I was watching Invincible, I was like, I don't know if I don't need to read this comic now. Now I'm not a super Invincible fan, so that's why I'm coming at it. It's from a normie perspective. Mm-hmm. If I was a diehard Invincible fan, of course that would be a different scenario. I'd be like, of course you got to, you know. But I'm like the guy when X-Men 92 cartoon came out. I never watched the X-Men 92. Well, I watched a couple episodes because I was curious, but I was such a fan of the comic books that I was like, why am I going to watch this inferior cartoon that's basically a copy of the comic book? So I was like, I felt I was in the elite club, and that the cartoon was for the normies, that maybe they would watch it and go get in the comic books. But now I'm approaching Invincible like the normies of the X-Men show, right? Because I'm not a fan of Invincible. So I'm just like, maybe the cartoon's good enough for me. Like, don't need to do more.
Well, I mean, you also have to keep in mind, like with the X-Men cartoon, for example, that was made for kids. You were not going to watch Wolverine brutally murder people. It's all very watered down.
That's true.
Same thing with the Spider-Man cartoon at the time. All these shows had very bizarre rules. They couldn't, like, they weren't allowed to have bullets. So all the cops had lasers. Yeah, they had laser guns. The second Ninja Turtles movie, they weren't allowed to use their weapons. They don't actually fight with their weapons in it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, if you rewatch it,
I don't think I've ever seen anything but the first one.
Yeah, the second movie, they're not allowed to use their weapons. Like when you watch like G.I. Joe, that cartoon, all lasers. They don't use bullets.
And anytime a vehicle explodes, you see a guy ejecting into a parachute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's safe. Don't worry.
The original dub of like Dragon Ball Z, same thing. Everyone would have to have lines where there was like, I see their parachutes. They made it out okay.
Yeah. And you remember that there was a cartoon that I grew up on, Battle of the Planets, G-Force, aka Science Team Ninja Gatchaman, which is just one of the greatest names ever. They added some animation, American animation, with this little robot called Seven Zark 7 into the show for the American version, so that at every episode they would have like this debriefing, and Seven Zark 7 would be like, it's a really good thing that they all were able to escape safely when you blew up their base, you know, like have this, so you would know that no one died. Like they literally would have exposition telling you no one died.
Yeah, and like one of the early Fantastic Four cartoons, they didn't even have the Human Torch. That's where they created that just fucking stupid robot. What was his name? Herbie? Right?
Herbie, yeah,
Yeah,
Herbie.
Herbie. They created Herbie because it was too graphic to have a man that could light himself on fire in a cartoon for
Oh
children.
yeah, weren't they like worried that like kids would actually try to light themselves on fire to become Human Torch?
I mean, the only thing you'd have to worry about with that cartoon is kids lighting themselves on fire to feel something while they're watching it.
I just want to feel something. That's how you get a whole bunch of little heat waves
There
from
you go.
Flash. I just want to.
It's true. I just want to feel something.
Well, I mean,
But
who knew? Like
yeah.
that argument used to sound ludicrous to me, but now I live in the Tide Pod generation, and I'm like, maybe people knew something.
Yeah, that was just viral marketing from Tide to say that their bleach was the most delicious. So, I mean, with that kind of stuff, though, of course the comics were better because they weren't made for morons. You know, even as goofy and stupid as some Golden and Silver Age comics can get, like Superman was like murdering people in those Golden Age comics. He would just like throw a guy and they would like go into the horizon and you're
Right.
like, that man is dead.
He's so dead.
And there was no little caption to be like, it's a good thing he landed on a big balloon. No, it's just he's dead.
Oh no,
that
like in
guy-
Superman #1, like he like leaves these people in a coal mine, like it collapsed, and like leaves them there,
Yep.
buried alive, and I'm like, what the hell?
Wasn't Batman like a lot like a killer in his first comic book? Like he
Yeah,
killed
he had a
people.
gun.
He had a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The original Human Torch like boiled a man alive in water.
You know, it wasn't back then. It wasn't like a faux pas to kill bad guys, right? Remember, like old school, like Dick Tracy, dude had a Tommy gun. he gunned down the bad guys. Like it wasn't this thing that we go, oh, like we just accepted. Yeah, they get what they deserve.
There was more of an idea like with comics, like, oh, well, you're not actually watching people do it. It's still drawing, so like you were able to get away with more because like they didn't come down on the comics like during the early 90s when you had the Spider-Man, the X-Men cartoons going on. Those comics are fucking murdering people left and right. Like so especially then, up until very recently, you had to read the comics if you wanted a story that wasn't made for a total moron.
Oh, for sure. That is true.
Yeah.
Like that, and that was part of the thing I'm talking about. Like today, I think TV is more sophisticated, and we're kind of in a renaissance era of television where we're probably getting some of the best quality TV programming ever.
Sure.
And you know, at least as far as production values go, I mean, you're always going to have issues where maybe a writer is not the best writer or director or whatever. But that's why I'm kind of posing that question. Like, if comics are now being adapted into a serialized format of TV, which is much more suited to, in my opinion, than say movies, comics themselves are serialized, then if there's enough of them, do we need the comics anymore? And that's why I was trying to ask the question of not on the context of the diehard comic fan, right? There's always going to be people like Skip and myself and you guys that are like, oh, this is a great comic. I want to consume it in the original. I love this art. I'm talking about just the general audience. Like, is there a reason for people to even come to the hobby to discover it? Or is it just good enough now that what they have and just whatever rises to the top in the comic world to come adapt into a TV show, they don't have to worry about that. They just worry about what makes it. And I don't know. I find myself watching these shows and I'm like, yeah, why would I pay $100+ a month on comics when I'm getting all this stuff, not for free, but essentially it's already part of my budget because I'm paying for these streaming services anyway.
It's there's a lot of reasons though. I mean, part of the problem is people within comics allowing TV and movies to take this place as, oh, this is the superior view. This is a superior form of entertainment when it isn't. It's a different kind of form of entertainment. It's much more passive. You can't sit there, Googling things and texting with friends while you're reading a comic.
No, but for example, quite many people feel of the opinion that the Boys TV show is better than the Boys comic.
Sure. I mean, in one way, it's not a fair comparison because they're just different.
I agree. I think, but the quality of the show is so good that there are a lot of people who are just like, I don't even need to try the comic book because I got this show and it's enough. And it's not me trying to make an argument of like TV versus comics, more of, is it just replacing it and comics are just finding a even harder road to make their mark because of this?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with comics is it's very different, and we don't talk enough about the differences. TV, not only is it more passive, you're not engaging with TV like you're engaging with a comic. TV and movies entirely dictate the pace to you.
True.
You don't have a say in that. Comics are unique in that you are it's actually kind of collaborative with the reader. The artist or the team working on the comic is setting up how they want you to read it. And then you get to decide the pacing of that story for yourself. And that's unique.
That's true. I agree. I mean, I'm obviously, you're preaching to the choir here. I love the comics. I just found myself pondering this question as I was starting to see a lot of these shows. And the thing is, we only have so many hours in the day, right? Like, I don't watch a lot of TV because it's a big time sink,
Right.
But if a show is really good, for example, I think The Boys is a very good show. I absolutely want to invest in it, and I want to follow it. Now, it so happens I was one of those people who's like, I'm not going to read the Boys comic. This is good enough for me. And then I ended up getting, like, on Humble Bundle, like the entire Boys collection for pennies on the dollar. So I was like, well, now I own it. I'm going to read. And I was like, wow, this is really good, but that's because I happened on it. It wasn't my intention. Mm-hmm. But again, that all leads me back to my thinking. And this is just all pondering. I'm not sure what the answers are, but it's just, I don't know. It's interesting. Japan has kind of been addressing this for a long time with the manga and anime scene. They seem to have their own little thing worked out of how to do things, where for the most part, manga is adapted into anime if it's successful. Mm-hmm. And the anime is typically extremely faithful by Western standards to the source material. I think that could be an interesting topic someday too. Like, oftentimes in Western material, we go, let's adapt this thing. And then it's like, that's nothing, like, good example is the DC stuff. Like, Zack Snyder verse is not at all the experience you get of the comics.
Right.
So who are they? They want comic fans to like it. And obviously a lot of comic fans do like it. It's, if you're a Batman or Superman fan, there's a strong possibility you'll like these movies because you're just predisposed. You like these characters already. It's just a matter of, are you upset at the differences that have been made? But the Japanese tend to be like, let's try to stay very true, like a similar experience. I don't know. Maybe we'll start seeing more of that. I think we're in the evolution stages in the West here of adapting that stuff and getting the industry more approachable. I think it used to be once upon a time comics were a joke. Like getting a comic made into a movie, like whatever. And now it's like studios are optioning everything left and right. You know, it's not this stigma of like, oh, we're gonna make a comic into a movie. And I think the more it becomes normal, the more we're gonna see that. And then I don't know. I find myself watching way more anime than reading manga because the ease of consumption. And I'm just like, well, it's good enough for me. You know, I can just watch the manga. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of like that all gets muddled too, because like Akira is such a gorgeous film, and the manga is so much better. It's not even comparable.
Well, yeah, the manga was huge though. Like they were adapting this huge manga series into a 2-hour movie. Just couldn't be done.
Yeah. But you know, but even then, like there's a lot of I mean, yeah, there's so many other series that, like, you know, sometimes the adaptations work, sometimes they don't. But at the end of the day, the comics and just reading them in that format is so different, and you're thinking differently, you're using different parts of your brain, it's just a different way to take in entertainment that's less passive. And it's important, I think, for people to enjoy, you know, to engage with their entertainment through like comics, through video games and things like that, to be somewhat engaged, not all the time, not for all of your downtime, but
I agree.
You know, you gotta like vary it up a bit.
I agree, but I think there's a lot of people who don't know any different because they've never sampled. So these are things that we all know because we've experienced comics, and so we know what we would be missing. But if you don't know what you're missing and you've seen the movies, you know, like for example, my bro who I live with, he's cool. He used to collect comics actually once upon a time back when I was, you know, in the 90s when I was, and he's like, man, I have no desire to pick up a comic ever again. I'm cool. I'll just watch the MCU movies. I'm good with it. You know, he's absolutely fine consuming it on that level. Now he's got a lot less time that he wants to, you know, to devote to that. He's got other hobbies. So, but I'm just thinking that's, we all have a saturation point. We can only consume so much. And so I'm just thinking that, you know, once TV becomes ubiquitous with comic book material, comics are already struggling to make their mark as it is. They'll always be around, you know, whether they become like vinyl records or not, who knows? But I don't know. I am seeming to think that might be just the way things go. But,
and people enjoy all this on different levels. There are people that like comics that, you know, they're always just going to read the big two. They're not going to go into the indie stuff. Just like there are people who enjoy music, and there are people who appreciate vinyls, and there are people who could give a fuck, and they won't argue about the differences in sound quality on listening on Spotify versus listening to a vinyl, you know?
Right. Like MP3 is a good example. It's pretty much replaced the old school music industry. Like if you go into a Best Buy or something, like the CD section is like one aisle now. It's like, I don't even know, you know, it's nothing. It used to be like half the store was CDs, music. And
people used to go to Best Buy for the purposes of purchasing a CD.
Yes, and there used to be just pure record stores like Tower Records and
Sam
Goody
for sure. Well, Goody's got it, but it's so weird. I mean, there was one time. This was funny. I was I still am a fan of the New Pornographers, that band. If anyone's familiar, Nico Case was part of that band, and when they put out their album Twin Cinema, I remember I went to Best Buy to pick up that album. And I was like, oh hey, do you have the New Pornographers album? And like the guy like started making this look, and I was like, the band.
Right.
It was just a whole thing. And they're going, oh. I'm like, you fucking idiot. Like, I think I'm like walking in here asking for that. Like, give me a little credit. Jesus.
Oh man. Let's see. Ed says TV has cinema quality productions for sure. That's true. They're getting up there. Comics are their own art form, distinct, irreplaceable. TV and movie, says Dragon Majesty. Comics used to be an inexpensive hobby that a kid could get into and partake in. I'm sure that today it's a video game or something else inexpensive that a kid can get into and make their own. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to diverge on another topic, but one of the things that comics, and this was, we could talk about this another day, comics are really hurting is, of course, their high price point, but also kids are into, the whole free-to-play video game industry has completely taken over everything, because kids don't really typically have money. So what I notice that modern kids are doing today, two things. A, YouTube costs no money. B, playing free-to-play video games, aka Fortnite, costs no money to play. And so they can partake as much as they want. And so all their friends are all doing it, which of course just helps build that cycle, because kids tend to do what all their friends do. So that's a tough thing. So it's not like kids are like, yeah, I'm getting into comics, you should too. That when I was growing up, I got people into comics because my friends would, I'd make new friends and they're like, oh, what are you doing? I'm getting comics. Yeah, come down to the comic book store with me. And then they would just naturally eventually want to get their own comic, and instead of just watching me get comics, and then it was contagious. But that's just not really happening today. And as comics are going up and up and up, you got material. Kids are playing mobile games. They're playing on free-to-play Xbox games, watching YouTube. It's all free to stuff. And comics have to compete with that. And that's a whole nother can of worms. But I think we should. It is. I think we should probably tie a bow on this one here. It's getting kind of late. Don't want to overextend our welcome. Did you guys have any final things that you wanted to just touch on before we make our exit stage left?
I'm good.
Not particular.
so much energy. Perfectly describes an Ash on Comics show.
There you go.
Skip may be AFK. I'm not sure. He's got the mute sign up. Zach, you have any final statements of anything?
Final statements of anything?
Well, I just didn't want to say, okay, we're done, and you were thinking about something to say.
Yeah, not really. No. I was just thinking all the stuff that we were just talking about. Yeah, I don't really have any final thoughts there.
Just read comics.
Read comics. If you have friends that don't read comics, find out why, and if there's something out there you think there really is. I'm convinced there is a comic book, at least one comic book series out there for everyone. If it's not superheroes, God knows. I'm just scratching the surface of indie comics, and I found 5 or 6 that appeal to me. And there's something. If I got my brother into reading comics, and he was never a big comic reader. He liked the MCU. We used to watch the old the Justice League cartoons, but he never read the books.
Yeah.
But I knew what he liked, and I recommended a few books for him, and now he's got some trades. He went and picked up some trades. You don't necessarily have to start big either. I know we talked about the increasing price points, omnibuses or an arm and a leg to find sometimes. But you get a volume 1 trade paperback with maybe 4 or 6 issues in it. You start small, and just kind of slowly introduce them to your friends over time. So yeah, just I want to give a little bit of a silver lining on this. If you got friends, they like a show, or something they might like, go ahead and recommend it to them. You never know, you might open up a whole new world to them.
A whole new world.
Yes.
All right.
I'm not gonna sing with you. I'm sorry.
Speaking of independent comics, there is an independent comic book that's coming out soon, May 5th, to a comic book store near you. Is probably
yes.
You might want to special order this, so you make sure you get yourself a copy. Tell your comic book store to order this because you want it. I'm very supportive of this. I love seeing creators make comics to go into stores and not have to be hunted down through weird services online.
Well, thank you.
So I want to promote this. If you're curious about the writer, he's in the chat with us. This is Joe Corallo's book.
True.
So, man, very good luck to the book. I can't wait till this comes out.
Thank you.
As far as next week, I'm going to be getting these books. So this is a sneak peek at my pull list next week.
Nice.
Pretty good list of books, if you ask me.
What you got? Ooh,
Firepower number 10, Geiger number 1 is coming out. King in Black number 5, which actually surprisingly I don't really like Marvel events, but it's been, if you just stick to the core books, don't go crazy into the side nonsense, just Venom and King in Black, it's been a fun ride.
Donny Cates, man.
Noctera is Scott Snyder's new book, and it's pretty cool little dark horror thriller set in a Mad Maxian. It's really weird. It's like, it's hard to describe, but it's cool. I've been enjoying it, and people I recommended to have liked it.
I liked it. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it's got great art by Tony S. Daniel. Usagi Ojimbo, of course, is just an ongoing masterpiece. If you don't know about Usagi Ojimbo by now, what are you waiting for? It's like it's 35 years of some of the greatest comics that have ever. This might want to be one of the best ongoing. I mean, it's been broken up because it's switched publishers, but man, it's crazy this legacy that this book has, and it just does not have the notoriety it deserves. And second to the last Venom book that I'll probably be buying, this is Venom 34, because the next issue is 200, because that's how it makes sense in Marvel world.
Cates is that's Cates' last run, isn't it? Or his last issue for Venom?
Yeah, Venom 200 will be his last issue, which is funny. He tweeted that out. He's like, Venom 200 will be my last issue. And at the time he was like on 31 or something. So I was like, oh, great. So we have like 169 issues to look forward to on your run.
No.
Yeah, no.
Stupid Marvel.
No.
Stupid legacy
34 to 200. And then of course it'll be back to when it gets to 50, they'll revert the numbering again because they got these fake milestones.
What they do.
But
at least he gets a milestone. Scott Snyder he left Justice League at number 49. They couldn't even come up with a like Justice League number 100. It was at 49.
That's really weird.
Scott Snyder on for one more freaking issue.
Yeah, you think you have one big finale, double-sized 50th issue?
Nope.
You know why? Because the editors.
Editors, man.
Editors suck. Am I right, Joe?
Oh yeah.
We hate editors. Sure. I'm just kidding.
Absolutely.
Joe's an editor, by the way, guys. Maybe Joe should be That's the problem. Is Joe's not editing DC Comics.
Joe is an exception to the rule.
Yeah, no,
every an exception.
That's like a no-brainer. Like, really, you couldn't stretch what? Wow. But yeah, no, Venom's actually a solid story. As much as I love to make fun of Marvel for their stupidity and their marketing dumbness, but that's not the fault of the writer or the other artistic creators on the book. They're all doing their best, typically. All right, am I back? Motown Philly's back again. Well, we lost Joe as a casualty.
We did. We lost Joe. He Dreamland was calling to him. He had to go. He said it. Yeah, he said it was around. But now we just lost Skip, and then there were two.
Well, at least it's at the end.
It is at the end. I was just gonna say on the back of what you were saying. You were showing next week's poll, and actually, I think I have 4 or 5 of those same titles on my poll list.
Wow.
So your influence is rubbing off on me in terms of books.
Great minds think alike.
The only edition I have, and my guilty pleasure, it's not even really guilty. I really do like this book. Avengers Mech Strike has number 3 that comes out next week. I'm interested.
I gave that a positive review.
It's been pretty good, I gotta say. Issue 2 had a nice little plot twist in there. I'm surprised I'm going to be interested in seeing how they address that.
I gave that. I did a review of that book on my channel, expecting to roast it. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm going to read this book and do a video on it. And then I read it and was like, oh, that wasn't too bad. Like, it has some silly things in it, but not overtly like stupid things. They're more silly, like old school classic comics silly. And I think it's a book that I said that would be good for kids. Most Marvel comics I would not want kids to read, just because they're full of nonsense that's just not healthy for them, I don't think. But this was just a good, fun Marvel book. It felt like the MCU too, like it felt like if you're a person that reads or watches MCU films, this would fit in. The characters feel like the characters from the MCU. And they have big robots, which is, there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you, Zach, for sticking it out, unlike skipping that other guy, Joe.
Those cowards. No,
I want to thank them.
They're great guys. They're great guys.
I want to thank them for staying up and being on my stream. I was sad that I lost internet at the end, because I wanted to personally say goodbye and thank them for hanging out, because it is late, for some of them, like Joe, who's and I always worry that I'm going to keep him up too late, and he's like, I'm never going back on Ash's stream again. I don't get sleep. So
that's a great person. That's just what he sounds like. The entire 3 hours we were talking, that's just what he sounds like.
Yeah. Well, guys, you guys that are in the chat, or anyone who's listening to this after the fact, I want to thank you. Your participation is always welcome and needed. It helps us carry the conversation. Just a bunch of schmoes talking about comic books every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time. Come join us. Bring food and drink and stuff to talk about. We'll be back again next week. You on for next week, Zach?
Yes, I'm definitely on for next week. Absolutely. My wife is going to be out of town and my work is slow, so I will be here desperate for comic conversation.
Yeah.
So, and I'll bring some topics, and it's gonna be fun. I'll be here. I'll bring the coffee, and I'll bring some of Mariah's lemon squares, maybe. God, I would kill for a lemon square right now, actually.
Yeah. So, thank you guys. I never know how to say goodbye. I just sit here and blab and say thank you and good night 50 million times. So I'm going to end it now. I'm Ash. This has been Other Boy Zach, and we'll see you next week. Same Ash time, same Ash channel. Take care.
Bye.